When a husband died in Victorian England, his wife would enter a minimum of 2 years of elaborate mourning rituals, wearing specific black clothing each day and enduring strict social isolation. These widows' dedication to public grief sparked intricate social codes that dictated everything from fabric textures to social interactions. Here's what life was really like for a Victorian widow. So, yeah, if these stories work for you, subscribe. And I'm curious, what time is it where you are? Comment your location and time. I saw someone from Tokyo last week saying it was already tomorrow there. Still trying to wrap my head around that. Okay, tonight it's Victorian widowhood. But hold on, get comfortable first. I mean it. Adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're gonna want to be cozy. Your eyes flutter open before dawn. For a blissful half-second, everything is normal. Then reality crashes down on you like a black wave. He's gone. The space beside you in bed is empty and cold. It was never supposed to be this way. Edward was only 42. The doctor said it was his heart. Just stopped in the night while you slept beside him, unaware your entire world was collapsing. This is day 3. Your bedroom is already transforming. The curtains are drawn tight against the morning light, casting the room in permanent shadow. Mirrors have been covered with black cloth. Tradition says they must stay covered until after the funeral to prevent your husband's soul from becoming trapped. Your lady's maid has already laid out your clothing for the day. The same black wool dress you wore yesterday, with its scratchy collar and oppressive weight. You've been through the motions in a fog, the doctor arriving, the death certificate, the funeral arrangements, your brother-in-law taking charge of Edward's business affairs while you've been confined to the house. Victorian society has very specific ideas about what happens now. You are no longer Mrs. Edward Harrington, respected wife of a successful merchant. You are a widow, and that identity comes with a mountain of expectations, restrictions, and rules. "Ma'am, are you awake?" your lady's maid whispers as she enters. "The undertaker's men will be here within the hour." Your sister-in-law asks if you'd like to see him before they take him. Of course you would, but first you must dress. In Victorian England, appearances matter more than ever in times of grief. Your personal sorrow must be matched by a perfect external display of mourning. The photographer will be coming as well, your maid adds softly. Yes, the photographer. Your stomach twists. In these modern times of 1870, it's become customary to take photographs of the deceased. Edward's body has been arranged in the parlour, dressed in his finest suit. The children will gather around his coffin for a final family portrait. The only image some of them will have to remember their father by. Jane says your mother-in-law is asking about the veil, your maid continues cautiously. She's concerned it's not adequate. You close your eyes. Your mother-in-law. Of course she would find fault with your mourning attire already. The black crepe veil you've hastily procured isn't long enough, apparently. It should fall to your feet, completely shrouding your face and upper body. Your weeping should be private, hidden behind a wall of black fabric. "Tell her I'll be ordering a proper one today," you say, your voice scratchy from crying. The maid helps you dress, layer by layer. First, your undergarments. Even these must be black now, or at least trimmed with black ribbon. Your corset pulled tighter than usual because Victorian mourning etiquette demands that grief should not lead to physical indulgence or comfort. The black stockings, the petticoats, and finally the heavy black wool dress with its high collar and long sleeves. Your sister-in-law says the children should wear the black armbands for the photograph, the maid says, securing your hair into a tight, severe bun. No elaborate hairstyles in deep mourning. The children, your heart breaks all over again thinking of them. Your youngest is only 4 and keeps asking when Papa will wake up. Your eldest daughter, 14, has been crying silently in her room, while your 16-year-old son is suddenly expected to be the man of the house. "Did you sleep at all, ma'am?" your maid asks gently as she fastens a black cap to your hair. Sleep? How could you sleep? Beyond the crushing grief is the fear. Edward's death wasn't just an emotional catastrophe. It's potentially a financial one too. You have no idea what provisions he's made for you. Victorian law doesn't automatically give a widow her husband's estate. Everything depends on his will, and you realize with mounting panic that you've never actually discussed it with him. He was only 42. It wasn't supposed to happen yet. "Lady Harrington is here," your maid says, referring to your mother-in-law by her title. She says the funeral arrangements need to be discussed. The funeral, another elaborate performance of grief with its own set of rules and requirements. You'll be expected to commission black-bordered announcement cards to be sent out. The house will be draped in black crepe. Flowers will arrive to mask the inevitable smell of decay, as embalming is not yet common practice. "She's asking about the coffin wood," the maid adds, "and whether you've ordered the mourning stationery." You close your eyes again. Victorian death is not a private affair. It's a production, a ritual with countless details. The wrong choice of wood for the coffin, the wrong style of funeral card, the wrong length of veil. Any misstep will be noted and judged. Your grief is now public property, to be evaluated by society. "Tell her I'm coming down," you say, rising with effort. The weight of the black wool dress is already oppressive, and you'll be wearing nothing but black for the next 2 years at minimum. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a mirror your maid has yet to cover. You hardly recognize yourself. Your face is pale with dark circles beneath your eyes, your hair severely pulled back, your body draped in black from neck to toe. This is your new identity, the Victorian widow, a walking emblem of death and grief. The house is unnaturally quiet as you descend the stairs. Clocks have been stopped at the moment of death, another superstition. The ticking of a clock might disturb the soul's journey, people say. The servants move silently, already dressed in their mourning clothes. Even they must observe the proper mourning period for the master of the house. In the parlour, Edward's body is laid out. The undertaker has done his work well. Edward looks peaceful, almost lifelike, his hands folded over his chest. Around the coffin, flowers are arranged to mask any odour. Black crepe drapes the mirrors and the windows. Your mother-in-law is there, already dressed in the full mourning attire she's kept ready since her own husband's death. She's been a widow for 12 years and still wears only black. Some widows never come out of mourning, and you wonder if you'll be one of them. "There you are," she says, her voice low. "The solicitor will be here tomorrow to read the will. I've taken the liberty of ordering the mourning cards. Black border, of course, with silver edging for a man of Edward's standing." You nod, unable to form words. Your throat feels tight with unshed tears, but Victorian propriety demands composure. Excessive displays of emotion are frowned upon, even as the external trappings of grief become more and more elaborate. "The children will need new clothes," your mother-in-law continues. "The girls in black with white trim for summer, and the boy with a black armband. I've already sent for the seamstress." You think about the expense of all this mourning attire, an entire new wardrobe for you and the children when you have no idea what your financial situation will be, but appearances must be maintained. A widow who doesn't properly observe mourning rituals is seen as disrespecting her husband's memory. "And you'll need to prepare for isolation," your mother-in-law adds. "For the first 3 months you should not leave the house except to attend church. No receiving visitors except immediate family." 3 months of confinement, followed by another 9 months of limited social contact. A widow in full mourning is expected to withdraw from society completely. No parties, no social calls, no public appearances except for church. For a full year, your world will shrink to the walls of your home. I know it's overwhelming, your mother-in-law says, her voice softening slightly, but there are rules for a reason. Structure helps with grief. Does it, you wonder? Or is it just another way society controls women, even in their moments of greatest vulnerability? Your thoughts drift to Queen Victoria, who has been in mourning for her beloved Albert for nearly a decade now. Her extreme dedication to mourning has set the standard that all British women must follow. The doorbell rings and your heart sinks. The photographer has arrived. It's time for the death portrait, a memento mori to preserve Edward's image one last time. Come, your mother-in-law says, straightening her own black veil. The children should be here. This will be their last memory of their father. As if on cue, your children file in, already dressed in hastily altered black clothing. Your youngest clutches a doll that someone has dressed in a small black dress. Even the toys must observe mourning. Mama, your youngest whispers, clutching at your skirts. Why is Papa still sleeping? How do you explain death to a 4-year-old? Victorian culture is obsessed with death, but somehow has no good language for explaining it to children. He's not sleeping, darling, you say gently, kneeling despite the stiffness of your mourning dress. Remember what we talked about? Papa has gone to heaven. When is he coming back? She asks, her little face confused. The photographer clears his throat awkwardly. Perhaps the children should be positioned around the coffin now, he suggests. The light is good at this angle. You stand and guide your children toward their father's coffin. The photographer arranges you all with professional efficiency, the children seated closest to the coffin, you standing behind with your hand on your eldest son's shoulder. Your face will be partly obscured by the veil, which is fitting. In Victorian death portraits, the living are often blurred or fading into the background, while the deceased is the sharp, clear focus. Please hold very still, the photographer instructs as he ducks beneath the black cloth behind his camera. This exposure will take several minutes, and so you stand, frozen in place, beside your husband's coffin, your children arranged around you like dolls. The living and the dead, captured together one last time. Outside, life in Victorian London continues. Carriages roll by, shops open, but in this room, time has stopped with the clocks. This is just the beginning of your new life as a Victorian widow. The next 2 years will be defined by strict rules of dress, behaviour, and social isolation. Your husband's death hasn't just taken him from you, it's transformed your very identity in the eyes of society. The camera flash momentarily blinds you. Day 3 of the rest of your life has begun. The morning of Edward's funeral dawns grey and drizzly. Perfect funeral weather, your mother-in-law remarks with grim satisfaction. You've barely slept. Your bed feels enormous now, the emptiness beside you a physical ache. 4 days since Edward died, 4 days of this new reality. The black dress laid out for you today is somehow even more oppressive than yesterday's. This one has a higher collar and longer sleeves with rows of black crepe trim. The fabric is deliberately dull, no shine allowed during deep mourning. Your maid helps you into it, then secures the new weeping veil your mother-in-law ordered. It falls well past your waist, the heavy black crepe obscuring your face completely. Can you breathe under there, ma'am? Your maid asks, concerned. Barely. The veil is stifling, but that's the point. Victorian mourning isn't meant to be comfortable. The physical discomfort is supposed to match your emotional state. I can manage, you say, your voice muffled through the thick fabric. The truth is, you're almost grateful for the veil. Behind it, your expressions are your own. No one can see your eyes, red and swollen from crying. No one can read the fear on your face, and right now you're terrified. The solicitor is downstairs, your maid tells you. He wants a word before the funeral. Your stomach clenches. Edward's will, your future, all hanging in the balance. Navigating the stairs with your vision obscured by the veil is treacherous. You grip the banister tightly, taking each step with care. The house is filled with people now. Edward's business associates, distant relatives, neighbours. All dressed in black, all speaking in hushed tones. The solicitor waits in Edward's study. Mr. Pembroke has handled the family's legal affairs for years, but his grave expression doesn't bode well. Your brother-in-law George stands beside him, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Harrington, Mr. Pembroke says with a slight bow, "First, my deepest condolences." "Thank you," you murmur through your veil. "You wanted to speak with me?" "Yes, about financial matters." He glances at George. "I thought it best to inform you privately before the reading of the will tomorrow." Your heart races. "Is something wrong?" Mr. Pembroke clears his throat. "I'm afraid Mr. Harrington's business had been struggling in recent months. There are substantial debts." The room seems to tilt slightly. "How substantial?" "Nearly everything," George cuts in bluntly. "The business is essentially bankrupt. There's the house, but it's mortgaged, and with no male heir of age. Your son is 16, too young to inherit the business, even if it were worth inheriting. What does this mean for me, for the children?" Your voice sounds distant to your own ears. "There is some insurance," Mr. Pembroke says gently. "Not much, but enough to maintain a modest household if you're careful. And of course, your family might—" "I have no family," you remind him. "Your parents died years ago. You have no brothers or sisters." "My wife and I have discussed it," George says, looking pained. "We can offer you the cottage at the edge of our property. It's small, but—" "I see." You cut him off, not trusting your voice. "The cottage," he means, "is barely more than a gamekeeper's lodge. From mistress of a fine London townhouse to living on charity in a cottage." This is the reality for many Victorian widows. One day mistress of a household, the next dependent on the goodwill of in-laws or scrabbling to survive. "The funeral procession should be forming," George says, checking his pocket watch. "We should join them." You nod, unable to speak past the lump in your throat. Financial ruin and funeral in the same hour. It's almost too much to bear. Outside, the rain has stopped, but the sky remains leaden. Black carriages line the street. Horses with black plumes on their heads stamp restlessly. The hearse is an elaborate affair, with glass sides to display Edward's coffin and black ostrich feathers adorning the roof. "You won't be attending the burial," your mother-in-law informs you, appearing at your side. This catches you by surprise. "I beg your pardon?" It's not proper. Victorian widows don't attend graveside services. Too emotional. You'll remain here. Another rule, another restriction. Already your world is shrinking. "I want to say goodbye," you protest. "You did, yesterday, with the photographer." Her tone brooks no argument. "The children will remain with you, except for James. He's old enough to attend as the male representative of the immediate family." Your son, forced into manhood at 16 by his father's death. The weight of it seems cruel. "What about the will?" you ask, keeping your voice low. "Did George tell you?" Your mother-in-law's lips thin to a line. "He did. It's unfortunate, but not unexpected. Edward was never good with money, too generous by half." The criticism of your dead husband stings, even if there's truth to it. Edward had always been optimistic about his business, certain the next deal would be the one to bring prosperity. "What will you do?" you ask. "Will you help us?" "George has offered you the cottage," she says, straightening her own black veil. "I've arranged for most of the household goods to be sold to cover the immediate debts. You'll be allowed to keep personal items and enough furniture for the cottage." Sold, your home dismantled, your possessions scattered. When? The auction will be next week. You should use the mourning period to sort through what you wish to keep. An auction, strangers pouring through your belongings while you're still in the depths of grief. The indignity of it burns. The funeral director approaches, his face a mask of professional solemnity. "The procession is ready, Lady Harrington." Your mother-in-law nods. "Very good. Mrs. Harrington and the younger children will remain here." He bows slightly and departs. Around you, the funeral guests begin to file out, joining the procession that will follow Edward's body to the cemetery. Your son James looks terrified as George leads him toward the first mourning carriage. "Mama," your youngest tugs at your skirt. "Where are they taking Papa?" You kneel, the heavy dress making the movement awkward. "They're taking him to be buried, darling. Remember we talked about this? Papa's body will stay there, but his spirit is in heaven." Her little face crumples. "But I want him here." "I know, love. I do too." You pull her close, not caring what your mother-in-law thinks of this display of emotion. The front door closes with finality as the last of the funeral party leaves. Suddenly, the house feels cavernous and empty. Just you, your daughters, and a few servants remain. "What do we do now, Mama?" your 14-year-old asks, her face pale beneath her black bonnet. What indeed? The ritual of Victorian death has strict choreography, and you're expected to know the steps. "We wait," you tell her, rising to your feet again, "and then we begin our mourning." The next hours pass in strange stillness. The servants move quietly through the house, removing the funeral flowers, starting to pack belongings for the inevitable move. Your daughters sit in the drawing room, unnaturally silent in their new black dresses. You try to write in your diary, but find you have no words. Finally, carriages begin returning. The men file in, sombre in their black suits. Your son looks pale but composed. "It's done," George tells you, removing his black gloves. "A fine service. The vicar spoke well of him." You nod, unable to respond. You weren't permitted to be there for your husband's final moments on earth. Another small cruelty of Victorian mourning customs. "The will reading will be tomorrow," George continues, "but you should begin making arrangements. The house will need to be vacated within the month." A month. To dismantle a life built over 17 years of marriage. "So soon," you manage. "The creditors are pressing," he says, not unkindly. "I'm sorry, Margaret. If there were any other way—" "There isn't. You know that. In Victorian England, a widow without independent means is at the mercy of her husband's family or debtors." Later, after the funeral guests have departed and the children are in bed, you retreat to your bedroom. Your maid helps you out of the oppressive mourning dress, unpinning the heavy veil. "Your face is all marked from the fabric, Mum," she says, concerned, "and there's a rash starting along your neck." You touch your skin, feeling the irritation. The black dyes used in mourning clothes are harsh. Some contain arsenic and other chemicals that can cause skin reactions. Another physical manifestation of grief. "It doesn't matter," you tell her. "No one will see. I won't be leaving the house for 3 months anyway." The isolation of deep mourning stretches before you like a dark tunnel. No visitors except immediate family, no outings except to church. Your social existence essentially suspended. "What should I pack first, Ma'am?" your maid asks tentatively. "Lady Harrington says we should begin tomorrow." Reality crashes back. The cottage, the move, the auction. My books, you say after a moment, and the children's things. Their comfort must come first. When your maid leaves, you sit at your dressing table, staring at your reflection in the mirror that's no longer covered now that the funeral is over. You hardly recognize yourself, pale, hollow-eyed, your hair pulled severely back. You're only 38, but grief has aged you overnight. On the table sits your jewellery box. You open it, touching the pearl earrings Edward gave you for your anniversary last year. They'll have to be sold, along with most of your jewellery. Widows in deep mourning wear only jet, a hard black stone used exclusively for mourning jewellery. You close the box with a snap. Tomorrow, the dismantling of your life begins in earnest. Morning brings the reading of the will, which only confirms what you already know. Edward died virtually penniless, with debts exceeding his assets. The insurance policy will provide a modest income, enough to survive, but not to maintain anything close to your current lifestyle. You should consider yourself fortunate, your mother-in-law tells you afterward. Many widows find themselves destitute. At least you have the cottage and an income. Fortunate, is that what you are? You don't feel fortunate. You feel hollow. How soon must we leave, you ask? The auction is in 5 days. You should be out before then. I've arranged for a cart to take your remaining possessions to the cottage. 5 days to pack up 17 years of marriage. The injustice of it burns. And what then? We just disappear into the countryside? Your voice catches. Your mother-in-law's expression softens slightly. It's for the best, Margaret. London is no place for a widow of limited means. The cottage is quiet, respectable. You can observe your mourning in peace. Peace, or isolation. In Victorian society, there's often little different for a widow. The next days pass in a blur of packing and tears. The children watch wide-eyed as their toys and books are sorted. Keep, sell, donate. Your eldest daughter silently helps you wrap the few pieces of china you're allowed to take. Your son has retreated into stony silence, angry at the world, at his father, at you. The morning of the auction dawns bright and clear, mocking your dark mood. You're already dressed in your heavy mourning clothes, preparing to leave before the auction-goers arrive. I don't want to go, your youngest sobs, clinging to the banister. This is our home. You kneel beside her, wiping her tears with your black-edged handkerchief. I know, darling, but we'll make the cottage our new home, and we'll be together. That's what matters. Empty words. You don't believe them yourself. Home isn't just a place. It's security, stability, status. All things you've lost. Come now, your maid says gently. The cart is waiting. You take one last look around the entrance hall of what was once your home, the grandfather clock that no longer chimes, the mirror where you used to check your appearance before receiving guests, the table where Edward would toss his hat and gloves when he returned from work. All to be sold to strangers. Mama? Your son offers his arm, trying so hard to be the man of the family now. It's time. You take his arm, steadying yourself. Yes, it's time. Outside, a simple cart waits to take you to your new life. No fine carriage anymore, just a farm cart for your remaining possessions and your shrunken family. As you climb awkwardly aboard, hindered by your heavy skirts, you feel the eyes of neighbours watching from behind curtains. The fall from grace is public, another humiliation heaped upon grief. Head high, your mother-in-law murmurs, surprisingly gentle. You're still a Harrington. The cart begins to move, carrying you away from your old life. Behind your black veil, tears stream unchecked down your face. No one can see them anyway. That, at least, is one small mercy of the weeping veil. The cottage is as small as you feared. 3 tiny bedrooms, a parlour barely large enough for a sofa, a kitchen with an ancient stove. Your furniture, what little you were allowed to keep, looks absurdly oversized in the cramped spaces. "It's cosy," your maid says diplomatically, surveying the main room. Cosy, a polite word for cramped, but it's clean at least, and weathertight, better than many widows receive. "We'll manage," you say, removing your bonnet but keeping your black dress on, even in private. Mourning must be observed. Help the children settle in. I need to see what supplies we have. The kitchen is sparsely stocked, some basic provisions sent ahead by your mother-in-law, enough for a few days until you can arrange more. Another reality of your new life, household management with severely limited resources. That evening, as you tuck your youngest into her strange new bed, she asks the question you've been dreading. "Mama, are we poor now?" You hesitate. How do you explain Victorian financial realities to a child? "We have less money than before," you say carefully, "but we have enough for what we need, and we have each other." She seems satisfied with this answer, but your older children are not so easily consoled. Your son has barely spoken since arriving at the cottage, and your 14-year-old daughter cried herself to sleep. Alone in your tiny new bedroom, you finally allow yourself to truly feel the weight of everything that's happened. The grief of losing Edward, the shock of financial ruin, the humiliation of dependence, the physical discomfort of mourning clothes, the isolation that stretches before you. 2 years of this, 2 years of black clothes and limited social contact, 2 years of struggling to support your children on a reduced income. 2 years of being defined solely as a widow. You open the window, needing air. The cottage overlooks fields, so different from the London street view you're accustomed to. In the distance, you can just make out the larger manor house where George and his family live, close enough to monitor you, but far enough to forget about you. This is the reality for countless Victorian widows. One day a wife, the next a widow, stripped of status, often of financial security, and forced into elaborate performance of grief whether they feel it or not. You close the window and prepare for bed, struggling with buttons and hooks without your lady's maid to help. Another loss. Most of your servants had to be let go. You've kept only your personal maid, who must now serve as cook and housekeeper as well. As you finally lie down in the unfamiliar bed, you realize something. Despite everything, the grief, the shock, the upheaval, you're still breathing, still thinking, still capable. Victorian society has scripts for widows, the perpetual mourner like Queen Victoria, the dependent relation living on charity, or the desperate woman seeking immediate remarriage for security. But perhaps there's another way, a path not yet clear, but possible. Tomorrow you'll begin to find it. The cottage wakes differently than your London home did. No clattering carriages outside, no calls of street vendors, just birdsong and the occasional lowing of cattle from nearby fields. It's been 2 weeks since the funeral, 2 weeks in this new life. You wake before dawn, as you always did, but now it's not to oversee a large household. It's because sleep won't come, hasn't come properly since Edward died. You dress in the dim light, struggling with the buttons of yet another black dress. Your skin beneath the fabric is irritated, angry red patches where the dye touches. The rash has spread from your neck to your shoulders and wrists. "Bloody arsenic," you mutter, a rare moment of unladylike language when no one can hear. The black dyes used in mourning fabrics often contain arsenic and other harsh chemicals. It's the price of proper mourning, literal poison against your skin. Your maid Jane, now your only servant, knocks softly. "Come in," you call, still fumbling with a button. Jane enters, already dressed for the day's work. She was your lady's maid in London, but here she serves as cook, housekeeper, and everything in between. You're lucky to have kept her at all. Many in service wouldn't accept such a reduction in household status. Let me help with those buttons, ma'am, she says, moving behind you. The rash is worse. I know. You wince as the fabric brushes against raw skin. Is there any carmine left? A little. I'll apply it after you're dressed. Her fingers work quickly at your back. I've started the porridge. It's oats again, I'm afraid. Oats again. Your London breakfast would have been eggs, toast, perhaps kippers or sausage. Now it's porridge, made thin to stretch the oats further. Another reality of your reduced circumstances. That's fine, Jane. Thank you. She finishes with your buttons and begins pinning your hair into the severe style appropriate for mourning. No elaborate curls or fashionable arrangements, just a simple, tight bun covered with a widow's cap. The children, you ask. Master James is already up. He's in the garden, chopping wood. Jane's voice holds approval. At 16, your son is trying desperately to be the man of the family. Miss Elizabeth is helping with breakfast. The little ones are still asleep. You nod, wincing as Jane secures the last hairpin. Any word from the village? The vicar's wife sent a note. She'll call this afternoon, if you're receiving. Are you receiving? According to strict Victorian mourning customs, you should remain in complete social isolation for the first 3 months. But the vicar's wife is different, a conduit to charity and assistance if needed. Yes. Tell her she may call at 3. You stand, smoothing the heavy black skirt. And Jane, could you see if there are any eggs to be had in the village? For the children. Jane's expression tells you what she thinks of the likelihood, but she nods. I'll try, ma'am. Downstairs, the cottage feels cramped with the oversized furniture from your London home. The dining table takes up most of the main room, chairs pushed awkwardly against walls. Your daughter Elizabeth, 14 and solemn in her black dress, is setting out bowls. "Good morning, mother," she says, formally, as if the trauma of recent weeks has aged her. "Good morning, darling." You kiss her forehead, noticing the dark circles under her eyes. She's not sleeping well either. Thank you for helping with breakfast. She nods, not meeting your eyes. Elizabeth took the move hardest, losing her friends and the music lessons she loved. The cottage has no piano, and there's no money for a teacher anyway. Outside, the rhythmic thunk of an axe tells you James is still chopping wood. You move to the window to watch him. His form is terrible. He's never had to do manual labour before, but his determination is clear in every swing. Your heart aches for him. At 16, he should be preparing for university or apprenticeship, not forced into premature manhood. He's been out there since dawn, Elizabeth says, coming to stand beside you. His hands are blistered. Another cost of your new circumstances. Soft hands turned calloused. Breakfast is a quiet affair. The younger children, still sleepy-eyed, eat their porridge without complaint, though you notice they don't ask for seconds. James joins you, his face flushed from exertion, hands raw. You pretend not to notice when he winces, grasping his spoon. "I was thinking," he says suddenly, "that I shouldn't return to school." Your spoon freezes halfway to your mouth. "What?" "We can't afford the fees anyway," he continues, voice oddly adult, "and I could find work, perhaps as a clerk or in a shop." The thought of your son sacrificing his education strikes you like a physical blow. Edward had such hopes for him. Oxford, perhaps, then law or medicine. "Absolutely not," you say firmly. "Your education comes first. Your father would want—" "Father is dead," James cuts in, his voice brittle, "and he left us with nothing." The table falls silent. Even the youngest children sense the tension. "James," you say softly, "we will manage, but not at the cost of your future." He looks ready to argue, but something in your expression stops him. He nods curtly and returns to his breakfast. After the meal, the day unfolds in a strange new rhythm. No callers to receive, no social engagements to prepare for, no household staff to manage. Just the quiet work of adjusting to reduced circumstances. You help Jane with the household chores, something no proper Victorian lady would have done in your previous life. Your hands, soft from years of leisure, blister on the washboard. But there's a strange satisfaction in the work, in feeling useful when everything else has been taken from you. The younger children have lessons at the kitchen table. You were fortunate to have been well educated yourself, so you can teach them basics, but it's not the same as the governesses they had before. Another loss. By midday, exhaustion hits. You're not accustomed to physical work, and the heavy morning dress makes every movement an effort. You retreat to what passes for a parlour, really just a corner of the main room with a sofa and small table. There's mending to be done, clothes to be altered, black dye to be applied to garments that aren't properly sombre. "Ma'am," Jane appears in the doorway. "There's a letter." You look up in surprise. "From whom?" Lady Harrington's housekeeper brought it. Jane hands you an envelope with your mother-in-law's precise handwriting. You break the seal, unfolding the single sheet. Margaret. "I trust you are settling into the cottage adequately. George informs me that your quarterly allowance has been arranged with the solicitor and will be paid promptly. It should be sufficient for modest housekeeping if you are prudent.I write to remind you of your obligations during deep mourning. I understand the vicar's wife intends to call. This is acceptable for matters of spiritual comfort, but you must not receive other visitors until the first 3 months have passed. To do otherwise would show disrespect to Edward's memory. Children should also observe proper mourning. James may attend church with you, but the girls must remain in seclusion for at least 6 weeks. Their mourning dresses should be black with white trim appropriate to their age. I shall call next week to ensure all is proceeding as it should. Lady Harrington. You fold the letter carefully, suppressing a flare of resentment, as if you needed reminding of mourning protocols, as if you had a social calendar bursting with engagements here in the middle of nowhere. "Everything all right, ma'am?" Jane asks, noticing your expression. "Just my mother-in-law being helpful," you say, the irony evident in your tone. Jane's lips twitch, but she maintains her composure. "I managed to get some eggs from the farmer's wife," she says, changing the subject. "She says her hens are laying well, and she'd be happy to sell to us regularly. A small victory." "That's wonderful, Jane. Thank you. And..." Jane hesitates. "She mentioned they're looking for help with mending and fine sewing if anyone should need extra income." The implication hangs in the air. You, doing paid work. The idea would have been unthinkable in your previous life. Ladies of your station did not work for wages, but now... "Did she say what it pays?" you ask quietly. 2 shillings for a shirt, more for detailed work. Jane watches your face. "She says there's more work than she can handle from the big houses in the area." 2 shillings. A pittance to your old self, but now it represents eggs for a week or new shoes for the children. "Thank you, Jane. I'll consider it." The afternoon brings the promised visit from Mrs. Collins, the vicar's wife. You receive her in your makeshift parlour, conscious of how shabby everything must look compared to your London home. "My dear Mrs. Harrington," she says warmly, taking your hands. "How are you bearing up?" She's a plump, pleasant woman in her 50s, dressed in serviceable brown wool, not fashionable, but kind-eyed. As well as can be expected, you reply, the stock answer expected of a Victorian widow. This cottage is charming, she says, glancing around. Her eyes linger on the incongruous mahogany cabinet wedged against one wall, a remnant of your previous life. It's adequate for our needs, calm, you say, maintaining dignity. Would you like some tea? Mrs. Collins accepts, and Jane brings the tea service, one of the few good pieces you were allowed to keep. The familiar ritual of pouring tea gives your hands something to do. The parish wishes to extend any assistance you might need, Mrs. Collins says delicately. We understand your circumstances have changed. Charity. The word hangs unspoken between you. In Victorian England, accepting charity is both necessary and humiliating for a woman of your former station. You're very kind, you say carefully. We're managing well enough. Mrs. Collins nods, but her expression is knowing. Of course, but should the children need anything, books for their education, perhaps, the parish fund is available. You swallow your pride. For your children you can accept help. Thank you, that's most generous. The conversation turns to safer topics, the church, the village, the coming harvest. Mrs. Collins is careful to avoid mentioning your reduced circumstances directly. Victorian politeness demands maintaining the fiction that nothing has fundamentally changed. I should mention, she says as she prepares to leave, that church attendance is expected, even for those in deep mourning. This Sunday would be appropriate for your first appearance. Church. The thought fills you with dread, facing the community, their curious stares, their whispered comments, but it's the one outing permitted to even the strictest mourning widow. Of course, you say, we shall be there. After she leaves, you sit quietly, considering what church attendance will mean. You'll need to wear the full weeping veil, that suffocating shroud of black crepe. The children in their mourning clothes will be objects of curiosity. Every eye will be upon you, judging your demeanour, your dress, your adherence to mourning protocols. Jane, you call, is my church veil pressed? Sunday arrives too quickly. You wake with a knot of anxiety in your stomach. Facing society, even the limited society of a country church, feels overwhelming after weeks of seclusion. Dressing is an ordeal. The black bombazine dress with its high collar and long sleeves. The black gloves. The black stockings, the black bonnet with its weeping veil that falls to your waist. By the time you're fully dressed, you can barely breathe through the layers of fabric. The children are similarly transformed into miniature mourners, James in a black suit with a crepe armband, Elizabeth in black with white collar and cuffs, the younger ones in white with black sashes, appropriate mourning for children. Remember, you tell them as you prepare to leave, people will stare. It's not because they're unkind, but because we're new, and, you hesitate, because of our circumstances. James straightens his shoulders. We're still Harringtons, he says, echoing his grandmother's words. The walk to the village church takes 20 minutes. By the time you arrive, your arms ache from carrying your youngest, and your skin prickles with heat beneath the heavy clothes. The summer day is warm, making morning dress even more punishing. Heads turn as you approach. Conversations pause. Eyes follow your progress up the path to the church door. Widow Harrington and her children, someone whispers, not quite quietly enough. You keep your eyes forward, glad for once of the concealing veil. The vicar greets you at the door with appropriate solemnity, guiding your family to a pew, not at the front where you would have sat in your previous life, but near the middle, a subtle acknowledgement of your changed status. The service passes in a blur. The heat inside the church is stifling, your veil becoming damp with condensed breath. Your youngest shifts restlessly beside you, unused to such confinement. Through the gauzy black, you see faces turning to glance at your family, expressions ranging from curiosity to pity to something harder to define. After the service, you stand awkwardly in the churchyard. Protocol demands you acknowledge greetings but not engage in unnecessary conversation. Deep mourning permits no social pleasantries. The vicar's wife makes introductions where necessary. Mrs. Harrington, may I present Mrs. Pembroke? Her husband manages the estate. You incline your head, murmuring appropriate responses. Yes, you're settling in. Yes, the cottage is adequate. No, you require nothing at present. All the while, sweat trickles down your back beneath the woolen dress, and the veil sticks to your face with each breath. Poor thing, you hear someone murmur as you pass. Left with nothing but debts, I hear. Another voice, lower. Always the way with merchants. No stability in trade. You pretend not to hear, shepherding your children toward home. James walks stiffly beside you, his jaw clenched. He heard too. The relief of returning to the cottage is immense. You remove the suffocating veil, gasping in fresh air. Your face is flushed, marked with the pattern of the crepe fabric. That was awful, Elizabeth declares, pulling at her tight collar. Everyone was staring. They'll lose interest eventually, you tell her, though you're not sure it's true. In small communities, the novelty of fallen gentry can last for years. The remainder of the day passes quietly. You read to the younger children from the family Bible, appropriately somber Sunday entertainment. James disappears on a long walk. Elizabeth sits by the window, staring silently at the fields beyond. That night, after the children are asleep, you sit at the small desk in your bedroom. The household accounts need attention. The quarterly allowance from Edward's insurance is barely enough for essentials, even with the most careful management. You think of the farmer's wife and her offer of sewing work, 2 shillings a shirt. If you sewed in the evenings after the children were in bed, how many could you complete in a week? 3, 4? It wouldn't be much, but it might mean new shoes for the children come winter or books for their education. Your mother-in-law would be horrified at the thought. A Harrington doing paid needlework like a common seamstress, but she doesn't have to know. The cottage is isolated enough that your activities can remain private. You take out paper and pen, beginning a letter to the farmer's wife. Your handwriting is elegant, well-practiced, a remnant of your privileged education. You'll have to be careful not to make the stitches too fine on the shirts. Working-class sewing looks different from a lady's embroidery. As you write, you realize something has shifted inside you. The initial shock and grief are still there, raw and painful, but alongside them is something new, a determination, a willingness to do whatever is necessary to survive this new reality and protect your children. Victorian society has strict rules for widows, rules designed to keep them dependent and controlled. But perhaps in this isolated cottage, far from judging eyes, there's room for a different path. Small acts of independence, tiny rebellions against the crushing weight of mourning expectations. You sign your name to the letter, a small act of defiance against a world that expects a widow to simply fade into black-clad invisibility. Tomorrow you'll find a way to deliver it discreetly. Tonight you sleep better than you have since Edward died. 2 months into your new life, the relentless heat of summer has given way to autumn's chill, making the cottage draughty in ways you never noticed before. You've taken to wearing fingerless gloves indoors, not the fine black mourning gloves for public appearances, but practical woolen ones that Jane knitted. They allow you to sew while keeping your hands from freezing. Sewing It's become your secret rebellion, your financial lifeline. After the children are in bed, you work by lamplight, stitching shirts and mending fine clothes for the nearby estates. You keep the work hidden when Lady Harrington visits, tucking it into a basket beneath your mending. A lady doing paid work would scandalize her, even in these circumstances. Tonight, you're finishing a shirt for Mr. Pembroke, the estate manager. Your fingers move swiftly, the needle flashing in the lamplight. You've always been skilled with a needle, an appropriate accomplishment for a Victorian lady, but now those ornamental skills have transformed into practical ones. A knock at your bedroom door interrupts your rhythm. You quickly cover the shirt with your own black shawl. "Come in," you call. Jane enters, carrying a steaming cup. "Chamomile tea, ma'am, for your headache." You smile gratefully. "Thank you, Jane." She glances at the poorly hidden work. "That's the third shirt this week. You should rest. We need the money," you say simply. Jane sighs but doesn't argue. She knows the truth of it. Your quarterly allowance barely covers food and essential bills. Without your secret sewing work, there would be no money for the children's books, for medicine when needed, for the 100 small necessities that arise. Mrs. Pembroke asked if you could do some fine embroidery as well for her daughter's trousseau. Jane hesitates. She pays well for it. More work, more income, but embroidery takes longer than simple shirts. When does she need it? Not until spring. Her daughter weds in May. May, 8 months away. By then, you'll be in half mourning, permitted to socialize more freely. The thought both relieves and terrifies you. The isolation of deep mourning has become a kind of protection, a bubble separating you from the judgment of the world. "Tell her I'll do it," you decide, "after Christmas." Jane nods and turns to leave, then pauses. "Oh, I nearly forgot. Master James had a letter today." Your heart skips. "From whom?" "His school friend, I believe. He seemed upset after reading it." James: "Your son has grown increasingly withdrawn since moving to the cottage." At 16, he feels the loss of status keenly. His friends from his London school have largely fallen silent, except for this one letter. "Thank you, Jane. I'll speak with him tomorrow." After she leaves, you return to your sewing, mind churning. What news could have upset James? You make a mental note to check on him first thing in the morning, then force yourself to focus on finishing the shirt. Each stitch means pennies toward your family's security. When the shirt is complete, you wrap it carefully in brown paper. Mrs. Pembroke's maid will collect it tomorrow, and payment will come discreetly. Coins passed from hand to hand, no mention made of the transaction to anyone who might report it to Lady Harrington. You fall into bed exhausted, your back aching from hours hunched over sewing. Sleep comes quickly these days, physical fatigue overriding even grief's insomnia. Morning brings a cold rain that drums against the cottage windows. You dress quickly, shivering. The black bombazine dress is at least warm, one small advantage of morning attire in autumn. Downstairs, James is already at the table, staring into a cup of tea. His face is drawn, eyes shadowed. Whatever news the letter brought clearly wasn't good. "Good morning," you say gently, taking the seat beside him. "Did you sleep well?" He shrugs, not meeting your eyes. "Well enough." The other children are still upstairs, and Jane is in the kitchen. This might be your only chance for a private conversation. Jane mentioned you received a letter yesterday. His jaw tightens. "From Stephen Parker. We were at school together. You remember Stephen, a cheerful boy from a good family who had visited your London home several times. How is he?" "Preparing for Oxford. His father secured him a place." James's voice is flat. "He wanted to know if I'd be returning to school this term." The pain in his voice is palpable. In your previous life, James would have been headed for Oxford too, following in his father's footsteps. Now, continuing even his basic education is a financial struggle. James, you begin carefully, I know how disappointing this must be. You don't know, he cuts in, voice low but intense. You can't possibly know what it's like. One day I'm James Harrington, son of Edward Harrington, destined for university and a profession. The next, I'm nobody, the son of a bankrupt merchant, living in a cottage with no prospects whatsoever. His words sting, but you recognize the pain driving them. You are still James Harrington, you say firmly. Your father's financial difficulties don't change who you are. Don't they? He laughs bitterly. Try telling that to Stephen Parker and the others who haven't bothered to write at all. You reach for his hand, but he pulls away, standing abruptly. I need to fix that leak in the shed before it gets worse. He strides out into the rain, without a coat. You watch through the window as he crosses the yard, shoulders hunched against the weather, looking far older than his 16 years. Elizabeth comes downstairs, already dressed in her black morning dress with white collar. At 14, she's caught between childhood and womanhood, a transition made more difficult by grief and upheaval. Is James angry again? She asks quietly, having overheard at least part of the conversation. He's struggling, you tell her, not wanting to burden her with adult concerns. This hasn't been easy for any of us. Elizabeth nods sagely. Mrs. Collins says we should be grateful that others have it worse. The vicar's wife has become a regular visitor, the only social contact permitted during deep mourning besides family. Her intentions are good, but her platitudes sometimes miss the mark. It's true that others suffer more, you acknowledge, but that doesn't make our difficulties any less real. Elizabeth twists a lock of hair around her finger, a nervous habit she's developed since Edward died. Will we ever go back to London? The question catches you off guard. You haven't thought that far ahead, focused only on day-to-day survival. I don't know, darling, not soon, certainly. I miss my friends, she says simply, and my piano lessons. Another luxury lost. Elizabeth had shown real talent, but the piano had been one of the first items sold to pay Edward's debts. Perhaps someday we can find a way for you to continue your lessons, you say, though you have no idea how to make that happen. The morning unfolds with its now familiar routine. Lessons for the younger children at the kitchen table, household chores shared between Eugene and Elizabeth, a simple lunch of bread and soup. In the afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrives. Through the rain-streaked window, you see a fine carriage pull up in front of the cottage. Your heart sinks when you recognize it. Lady Harrington's. Jane, you call. Lady Harrington is here. Quickly, help me with my cap. You hadn't expected visitors in this weather and are dressed more simply than protocol demands. Jane rushes to help you pin on your widow's cap properly and straighten your collar. Lady Harrington doesn't wait for an invitation, but sweeps into the cottage with an air of ownership. At 60, she remains an imposing figure, tall and rigid in her own mourning clothes. Though her son has been dead for 10 years, she still wears black, her only concession to the passage of time being the touches of purple and grey in her accessories. Margaret, she says with a slight nod, I was passing and thought to check on you and the children. Passing? The cottage is miles from anywhere Lady Harrington would have cause to visit. This is a deliberate call, and you both know it. How kind, you say, maintaining the polite fiction. May I offer you tea? Lady Harrington glances around the cramped main room, her expression revealing nothing. Yes, that would be acceptable. You signal to Jane, who disappears into the kitchen to prepare tea. Lady Harrington seats herself in the best chair, originally from your London drawing room, now looking absurdly grand in the cottage. How are you finding the country life? She asks, removing her gloves. We're adapting. You say carefully. The children enjoy the fresh air. She nods, as if this confirms something. And you're observing proper mourning protocols, I trust. Of course. Her eyes narrow slightly. I heard you were at church again on Sunday. Yes, as is appropriate. Even in deep mourning, church attendance is expected. We've been every week since arriving. She doesn't sound convinced. And you've received no callers except the vicar's wife? So, that's why she's here. Someone has reported your activities, such as they are. Mrs. Collins visits occasionally for spiritual guidance, you confirm. Otherwise, we maintain isolation as custom dictates. Jane returns with the tea tray, saving you from further interrogation. The ritual of pouring tea gives you a moment to compose yourself, and the children's education, Lady Harrington continues after taking a sip. I teach them myself, you say, though James should return to school if possible. Her expression hardens. I'm afraid that's out of the question. The expense cannot be justified. Your hands tighten around your teacup. His education is vital for his future prospects. His prospects were determined when his father died bankrupt, she says bluntly. A clerk's position is the best he can hope for now, and he needs no Latin or Greek for that. The injustice burns in your chest. Edward would want... Edward is dead, she cuts in, using the same brutal words James had thrown at you earlier, and his wishes died with him when he failed to provide for his family. The silence that follows is tense, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the mantel, a cheap replacement for the grandfather clock you lost in the auction. Now, Lady Harrington continues, setting down her cup, I've come with a practical purpose as well. George believes it would be appropriate to place Elizabeth as a governess when she turns 16. A governess? You stare in shock. She's only 14. Which gives her 2 years to complete her education and prepare for the position. Lady Harrington speaks as if this is already decided. The Wilsons have expressed interest. They have 3 young daughters in need of instruction. Your mind reels. Elizabeth, your sensitive musical daughter, sent to work as a governess. That peculiar position, neither servant nor family member, often lonely and thankless. The very fate you yourself narrowly escaped by marrying Edward. She's too young, you protest, and there's no need to decide this now. Lady Harrington's expression turns pitying. There is every need. Your allowance barely covers 4 children. When Elizabeth can support herself, it will ease your burden. The worst part is, she's not entirely wrong. Your financial situation is precarious, but the thought of sending Elizabeth away so young, still grieving her father, I'll consider it, you say finally, knowing you have little choice. Lady Harrington seems satisfied with this concession. She glances at the clock. I should return before the weather worsens. As she stands to leave, her eye catches something, the edge of the shirt you were sewing, visible where Jane didn't quite hide the basket properly. She stares at it for a long moment, then looks at you. Margaret, she says slowly, are you doing paid needlework? Your throat goes dry. You are, aren't you? Her voice is dangerously soft, taking in sewing like a tradesman's widow. The contempt in her voice stiffens your spine. Yes, you admit, I am. Have you no sense of propriety, of what's due to Edward's memory? What will people think when they discover a Harrington taking in mending like a common seamstress? They'll think I'm a mother trying to provide for her children, you reply, surprising yourself with your boldness. Lady Harrington draws herself up to her full height. This is unacceptable, completely unacceptable. Perhaps, you say, finding strength in desperation, but it's necessary. The allowance isn't enough, especially with winter coming. Then you should have economized further. On what? The frustration of months breaks through your usual restraint. Food, fuel, the children's education? Tell me, Lady Harrington, what else should I sacrifice? She looks genuinely startled by your outburst. For a moment, the imperious facade cracks, revealing something almost like respect. Then it's gone, replaced by cool disapproval. I see grief has affected your judgment, she says stiffly. We'll discuss this another time, when you're more composed. With that, she sweeps out, leaving you trembling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. You've never spoken to her so directly before. The old Margaret, the proper Victorian wife, would never have dared. Jane appears from the kitchen where she'd been listening. "Well," she says with uncharacteristic bluntness, "that went well." A startled laugh escapes you. "She'll probably cut off our allowance entirely now." "She won't," Jane says confidently. "It would reflect badly on the family, but you should prepare for her to watch us more closely." You sink into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "What am I going to do about Elizabeth? I can't send her away as a governess." "We have 2 years to figure it out," Jane reminds you. "Much can change in that time." Later, after the children are in bed, you sit by the fire darning socks. The confrontation with Lady Harrington has left you shaken but also strangely empowered. For the first time since Edward's death, you stood your ground, made your own decision. A soft knock at the door interrupts your thoughts. James enters, his expression contrite. "I wanted to apologize," he says awkwardly, "for what I said this morning." You set aside your darning. It's forgotten. He sits in the chair opposite, looking into the fire. "I heard grandmother talking about Elizabeth becoming a governess," so he was listening. "Nothing's decided," you assure him. "But she's right, isn't she? We can't afford for us both to continue our education." His voice is resigned. "While one of us has to sacrifice." Your heart breaks for him, for the burden he's taking on at 16. "No one is sacrificing anything yet," you say firmly. "We'll find a way forward." "I could still find work," he suggests, "but without the anger of before. Perhaps not as a clerk right away, but something to contribute." You study his face in the firelight. In just 2 months, he's changed. The softness of boyhood giving way to the angles of a man. Not from natural aging, but from circumstance forcing him to grow up too quickly. "Let's make a compromise," you propose. "You continue your studies this year, at home with me teaching what I can. Meanwhile, we look for opportunities, apprenticeships, positions that offer education along with employment." He considers this, then nods slowly. "That seems fair." Relief washes through you. One crisis averted, at least temporarily. "Good. Now get some sleep. We have lessons tomorrow." After he leaves, you return to your darning, mind turning over the day's events. Lady Harrington's visit, James's struggles, Elizabeth's uncertain future. 3 months ago, you were a respected merchant's wife with a secure place in society. Now you're a widow fighting for your family's survival, breaking Victorian conventions out of necessity. The strangest part, despite everything, the grief, the hardship, the uncertainty, there's a thread of something new emerging. Independence, agency, a voice you didn't know you had. As you finish darning the last sock, you make a decision. You'll continue taking in sewing work. Lady Harrington's disapproval be damned. You'll find a way to educate both James and Elizabeth, even if it means working into the night every night. Victorian society has strict rules for widows, but rules can be bent when survival is at stake. Tomorrow marks 3 months since Edward's funeral. The first phase of mourning is ending. Soon you'll be permitted more social interaction, more freedom of movement. You're no longer just surviving day to day. You're planning, adapting, fighting. And somewhere beneath the heavy black bombazine and the grief, you're changing. The first real snow of winter blankets the cottage and surrounding fields, transforming the world into something pristine and silent. It's been 4 months since Edward's death, 4 months of black bombazine and isolation, 4 months of struggle and adaptation. But today marks a transition. You stand before the small mirror in your bedroom, studying your reflection. The heavy weeping veil is gone, replaced by a shorter black veil attached to your bonnet. You're still dressed entirely in black, but there are subtle changes. White cuffs at your wrists, a white collar at your throat, small concessions to the passing of time. You've entered second mourning. "You look almost human again," Jane remarks as she helps adjust your collar. "I feel almost human," you admit, touching the white cuff. After months of unrelieved black, even this small touch of white seems shockingly bright. In Victorian mourning traditions, the transition from deep mourning to second mourning brings small but significant changes. You can now receive visitors beyond immediate family. You can write and receive personal letters on paper with a narrow black border instead of the thick, black-edged stationery of deep mourning. You can even attend small gatherings, though nothing as frivolous as a ball or theatre performance. Most importantly, you can move more freely in the world again. "The dress still chafes," you say, rubbing at your neck where the black dye continues to irritate your skin. "The arsenic," Jane nods knowingly. "At least you're not wearing the veil all day anymore. That was the worst of it." She's right. The weeping veil had been torture, hard to see through, difficult to breathe in, and worst of all, lined with toxic black dye that left your face raw and irritated. Victorian beauty comes at a cost, and mourning beauty at an even higher one. "What time is Mrs. Collins arriving?" you ask, pinning a simple jet brooch to your collar, your first piece of jewellery since Edward died, appropriate for second mourning. 11 with the other ladies from the parish committee. Jane looks both pleased and worried. "Are you sure you're ready for this, ma'am?" Today marks another first, hosting visitors at the cottage. Mrs. Collins has invited the parish charity committee to meet here, a gesture meant to ease your re-entry into society. 6 women, all from respectable local families, all curious about the widow from London. "Ready or not, it's happening," you say with a small smile. "Is everything prepared?" "Such as it is," Jane sighs. "I've done what I could with what we have." What you have isn't much. Tea, obviously, some thin slices of bread and butter, seed cake made with the cheapest ingredients. It's a far cry from the elaborate refreshments you would have offered in London, but it's the best you can manage on your limited budget. "It will be fine," you assure her, though your own stomach knots with anxiety. Downstairs, the main room has been transformed as much as possible. The mismatched furniture is arranged to create a semblance of a proper parlour. Fresh pine branches in a cracked vase add a touch of green and a pleasant scent. Elizabeth has polished every surface until it gleams. Your eldest daughter enters from the kitchen, her own black dress modified with white cuffs for second mourning. At 14, she's becoming a young woman, though grief has matured her beyond her years. "You look nice, mother," she says, studying your modified mourning outfit. "So do you." You straighten her collar. "Are your brothers and sister ready?" Elizabeth rolls her eyes in a rare moment of teenage normalcy. "James is, but he's threatening to disappear before the visitors arrive. And I had to bribe Mary and William with stories later if they behave." You laugh. Another thing that feels newly permitted in second mourning. Deep mourning demanded such solemnity that even laughter seemed disrespectful. Well done, though I doubt James will actually flee. He's too proper for that. "Want to bet?" Elizabeth raises an eyebrow. "He said something about urgent wood chopping on the far side of the property." Men have it easier, you reflect for the 100th time. James can escape social obligations with minimal consequences. As women, you and Elizabeth must participate, observe the niceties, maintain connections. The sound of wheels on the gravel path interrupts your thoughts. They're here. Places? Everyone, you say, only half joking. This small social gathering feels like a performance after months of isolation. The parish ladies arrive in a flurry of cloaks and polite exclamations about the weather. Mrs. Collins makes introductions and you smile and nod, trying to fix names to faces. Mrs. Pembroke, the estate manager's wife. Mrs. Wilson, who had apparently expressed interest in Elizabeth as a future governess. Mrs. Atkins, the doctor's wife, and two sisters, the Mrs. Fairfax, unmarried ladies of a certain age who seem to know everything about everyone in the parish. Such a charming cottage, Mrs. Wilson says, looking around with poorly disguised curiosity. So rustic. Thank you, you reply evenly. We've found it quite adequate for our needs. The women settle into the available seats, and Jane serves tea with dignified precision. You can feel their eyes taking in everything. The mismatched cups, the thin slices of bread and butter, the darned cushions on the chairs. We're so pleased you've joined our parish committee, Mrs. Harrington, Mrs. Collins says warmly. We desperately need someone with your organisational skills. Organisation is the least of what they need, you suspect. What they really want is the novelty of a London widow in reduced circumstances. Part charity case, part entertainment. I'm happy to help however I can, you say, pouring tea with a steady hand. The meeting progresses with discussion of parish affairs, the coal fund for poor families during winter, layettes for expectant mothers in need, holiday baskets for the elderly. You listen attentively, noting mental parallels to the charitable committees you served on in London. Though there, you were among the donors, not potentially among the recipients. Mrs. Harrington, Mrs. Pembroke says suddenly, your stitching is really quite remarkable. The shirt you did for my husband fits him perfectly. A beat of silence falls over the room. Your secret work, not so secret after all. Thank you, you say calmly, though your heart races. Will this confirm the gossip Lady Harrington has surely spread about your inappropriate employment? To your surprise, Mrs. Pembroke continues enthusiastically. In fact, I was wondering if you might be interested in more such work. My sister in the next county needs wedding clothes for her daughter, and good seamstresses are hard to find. You hesitate, uncertain how to respond. Oh, what a splendid idea. Miss Fairfax, the elder of the sisters, chimes in unexpectedly. Mrs. Harrington's needlework is the talk of the county. I myself have a shawl that needs repairing. Delicate work, silk embroidery. I'd pay handsomely. More offers follow. The ladies suddenly animated. Mrs. Wilson has shirts for her husband. Mrs. Atkins needs christening gowns for her expected grandchild. Even Mrs. Collins admits she's been admiring your fine stitching on Elizabeth's collars at church. Your head spins. Rather than condemn your work as inappropriate, these women seem to respect it, even value it. In London, taking in sewing would have been social suicide. Here, in this rural community, practical skills apparently trump rigid class distinctions. I would be pleased to take on what work I can manage, you say carefully, though of course my morning obligations and my children must come first. Of course, they chorus, seemingly satisfied with this proper nod to priorities. As the meeting concludes and the ladies prepare to leave, Mrs. Pembroke hangs back. When the others have moved toward the door, she speaks in a low voice. "Lady Harrington need not know about any arrangements between us," she says with a knowing look. "My husband manages her son's estate, but our household affairs are our own business." You stare at her, startled by this unexpected alliance. "I appreciate your discretion." She nods, buttoning her cloak. "We country wives must stick together, Mrs. Harrington. London has its ways, but we have ours." After they've all gone, you sit in sudden silence, trying to process what just happened. Not only did these women accept your paid needlework, they've offered more, enough to potentially double your meagre income if you can manage the time. "Well," Jane says, beginning to clear the tea things, "that was interesting." "Very," you agree, still stunned. Elizabeth appears from the kitchen where she'd been listening. "Does this mean you'll be sewing even more now?" she asks. "It seems so." You look at your daughter thoughtfully. "Would you like to help? You have a fine hand with embroidery." Her face brightens. "Could I? Would they pay for my work too?" "I don't see why not." The idea takes root quickly. Elizabeth helping with the sewing means more income, but also practical training in a skill that might support her if necessary, better than being sent away as a governess at 16. "Jane, do we still have that book of embroidery patterns from London?" you ask. "In the trunk under your bed, I believe." "Excellent. Elizabeth, we'll start with something simple. Handkerchief borders, perhaps." By the time James returns from his strategic wood-chopping expedition, you and Elizabeth are bent over fabric at the table, sorting silks by colour. "What's all this?" he asks, stomping snow from his boots. "Mother's going to teach me proper embroidery," Elizabeth tells him, "for paying customers." James's expression shifts from surprise to something more complex. "I see." You watch him carefully. "Is that a problem?" He hesitates. "No, it's just in London. Ladies didn't—" "We're not in London anymore," you remind him gently, "and circumstances change." He nods slowly. "I suppose they do." Then, with visible effort, "Can I help somehow?" The question catches you off guard. "You want to help with sewing?" He flushes. "Not sewing exactly, but I could, deliver the finished work, keep accounts." You consider this. James needs purpose just as much as the rest of you. "Accounts would be very helpful, actually. I've been keeping track in my head, but a proper ledger would be better." His expression lightens. "I could do that. Father taught me basic bookkeeping last year." Something eases in your chest, a tension you hadn't realized you were carrying. Your son finding his footing in this new reality. Your daughter learning skills that might protect her future. Small victories in a landscape of loss. That night you write in your diary for the first time in months. The words come more easily than expected. 4 months a widow. Today I entered second mourning and received visitors for the first time. Rather than the condescension I expected, I found unexpected allies. The parish ladies have offered sewing work. Good pay for fine stitching. Elizabeth will learn alongside me, and James will keep our accounts. We are finding our way, slowly but surely. I still miss Edward terribly. The children still cry for their father, but somehow we are adapting, becoming something new out of necessity. Lady Harrington would be appalled at my trade, but I find I care less about her opinions with each passing day. What matters now is survival, and if my needle is our lifeline, then so be it. The days take on new rhythm, mornings still devoted to the children's education. Afternoons to household tasks. But evenings now belong to sewing, you and Elizabeth working side by side in the lamplight, with James occasionally joining you to update the simple ledger he's created. The work is demanding but rewarding. Each completed shirt, each embroidered handkerchief, each mended lace collar means a few more shillings towards security. You develop a reputation in the area for fine work and reasonable prices. Mrs. Wilson asked if you would consider teaching her daughters to embroider, Elizabeth reports after church one Sunday. She'd pay for lessons. Teaching, another possibility you hadn't considered. What did you tell her? That you'd think about it. Elizabeth hesitates. I could help with the younger girl. She's only 8. Your daughter as a teaching assistant. The idea warms you. We'll discuss it with James. See if it makes financial sense. James takes his role as accountant seriously. Each evening, he reviews the day's expenses and income, making careful notations in his ledger. If you took on 2 students twice a week, he calculates, and charged what Mrs. Wilson suggests, it would equal almost a week's worth of shirt making for much less effort. But would Lady Harrington approve of teaching? You wonder aloud. It's one thing to sew privately, another to advertise myself as an instructor. James shrugs. Does it matter? She's in London for the winter. This is true. With the first heavy snows, Lady Harrington retreated to her London house, leaving you blessedly free of her direct scrutiny. Still, her shadow looms large. I suppose it doesn't, you say finally, and teaching is certainly more respectable than plain sewing. The decision made, you begin preparations. The cottage's main room is rearranged to accommodate small lessons twice weekly. You compile samples of various stitches and techniques. Elizabeth practices basic instruction with Mary, who proves a patient subject for her sister's teaching experiments. Life settles into its new patterns. The harshest edges of grief begin to soften, though there are still moments when loss catches you by surprise. Edward's birthday, the anniversary of your wedding, moments when something happens that you instinctively turn to tell him. Second morning brings small freedoms that feel enormous after the restrictions of deep mourning. You can walk in the village without causing scandal. You can correspond with old friends. You can receive visitors and even make careful calls yourself. One January afternoon, a letter arrives bearing the London postmark. Your heart races when you recognize the handwriting. Catherine, your closest friend from your previous life. My dearest Margaret. I was beyond relieved to receive your letter after so many months of silence. While I understood the propriety of deep mourning prevented correspondence, I have thought of you constantly and worried endlessly about you and the children. London is much the same, though your absence is keenly felt in our circle. People speak of you often with genuine concern. If you would permit it, I would very much like to visit you this spring when the roads are passable again. My husband has business in the area in April, and I could accompany him. Please say yes, dear friend. I long to see you face to face rather than through these inadequate letters. Your devoted friend, Catherine. You press the letter to your chest, emotions welling. Catherine, your dearest friend, offering to bridge the gap between your old life and new. The prospect of seeing her brings both joy and anxiety. What will she think of the cottage, of your reduced circumstances, of the calluses on your once soft hands? Good news? Jane asks, noticing your expression. Catherine wants to visit in spring? Jane's eyebrows rise. Lady Durham? Here? You nod, suddenly seeing the cottage through Catherine's eyes, the cramped rooms, the patched furnishings, the obvious poverty compared to her London mansion. Perhaps it's not a good idea, you murmur. Nonsense, Jane says firmly. If she's a true friend, the cottage won't matter. And if she's not? Then better to know now than waste more years on false friendship. As usual, Jane's practical wisdom cuts through your anxiety. You're right. I'll write and tell her she's welcome. That evening, as you work on a particularly intricate piece of embroidery for Mrs. Pembroke's sister, you reflect on the changes these months have wrought. You're still Margaret Harrington, Edward's widow, bound by the strict mourning customs of Victorian society. But you're also becoming someone new, a woman who works with her hands, who teaches, who balances ledgers and makes decisions without deferring to others. Second mourning might restrict your clothing to black with touches of white, your social activities to quiet gatherings and church, your emotional expression to subdued contentment rather than joy. But within those boundaries, you're finding spaces to breathe, to grow, to discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. Mother, Elizabeth says, looking up from her own embroidery, do you ever think about what happens after mourning ends? When we can wear colours again? The question startles you. You've been so focused on surviving the present that you've rarely let yourself think that far ahead. Sometimes, you admit, but that's still more than a year away. Elizabeth nods thoughtfully. I was just wondering, will we stay here, in the cottage? I don't know, you answer honestly. Much depends on how we fare financially. I like it here, she says, surprising you. It's small, but it feels like ours in a way the London house never did. You consider this. The London house had been Edward's domain, filled with his chosen furnishings, run according to his preferences. This cottage, for all its limitations, has become shaped by you and the children. I like it too, you realise, though I miss certain conveniences. Like hot water that doesn't require hauling from the stove, Elizabeth laughs. Exactly. The fire crackles softly as you both return to your work. Outside, snow falls steadily, insulating the cottage in a blanket of white. Inside, for this moment at least, there is warmth, purpose, and the quiet comfort of shared work. Second mourning will last until the 1-year anniversary of Edward's death. Then half-mourning will begin, bringing further easing of restrictions, colours like lavender and grey, more social engagements, perhaps even music and moderate entertainment. For now, though, this quiet evolution is enough, each small step away from the paralysing grief of those first days, each small act of independence, each small discovery of strength you never knew you had. You are a Victorian widow bound by society's strictures, but you're also becoming something society never prepared you to be, a woman standing on her own. Spring arrives tentatively, with pale green buds and timid birdsong. 8 months since Edward died, 8 months of black clothing and restricted social interactions, 8 months of building a new life from the wreckage of the old. The cottage has transformed with the seasons. What seemed bleak and unfamiliar in autumn now feels, if not exactly like home, then at least like a place where you belong. Small touches reflect your growing comfort. Wildflowers on the table, cushions recovered with fabric scraps, a bookshelf James built from salvaged wood. You stand at the window watching the lane for signs of visitors. Catherine arrives today, the first person from your London life to see your new circumstances. Despite your correspondence, anxiety gnaws at your stomach. Will she pity you, judge you, find you changed beyond recognition? Stop fussing, Jane says, catching you straightening the same cushion for the 3rd time. The cottage is as presentable as it's going to be. I know, it's just words fail you. How to explain the collision of past and present that Catherine's visit represents? Jane understands anyway. She's your friend. If she's worth keeping, she'll see past all this. She gestures at the modest surroundings. You're right. You smooth your dress, still black, but with white cuffs and collar for second mourning. I'm being silly. Not silly. Human. Jane peers out the window. Carriage coming. Your heart leaps to your throat. It's a fine carriage, much finer than anything that usually stops at the cottage. The Durham coat of arms is painted on the door, a stark reminder of the world you once inhabited. Catherine emerges in a swirl of fashionable skirts, her face breaking into a wide smile when she sees you in the doorway. Unlike you, she's dressed in the latest London fashion, a walking dress of green silk that makes your black bombazine look even more sombre and outdated. Margaret. She rushes forward, propriety forgotten in her enthusiasm, and embraces you tightly. Oh, how I've missed you. The genuine warmth in her voice melts your anxiety. You return her embrace, suddenly fighting tears. I've missed you too. She pulls back, studying your face. You look well, Melfine, she says, though her eyes register changes grief and hardship have etched into your features. As do you reply, meaning it. Catherine glows with health and prosperity, her skin smooth, her hands soft and unblemished by labour. This must be the famous cottage. She turns to take in your home, and you brace yourself for polite condescension. Instead, she says, with real interest, how wonderfully cosy. I've always said those London drawing rooms are absurdly large. One can't have a proper conversation when people are seated miles apart. You laugh, startled by her generous framing. It's certainly intimate. Show me everything, she insists, linking her arm through yours. I want to see how you've settled in. The tour doesn't take long. 4 small rooms are quickly explored. Catherine exclaims over the view from the windows, the clever arrangement of furniture, the sampler Elizabeth is working on. Her enthusiasm seems genuine, not the forced brightness of someone pitying your reduced circumstances. And here's the infamous sewing enterprise I've heard about, she says, touching a shirt you're working on for Mr. Pembroke. Your stitches were always exquisite. I'm not surprised you built a business from your skill. You glance at her sharply. You don't disapprove? Disapprove? Why on earth would I? She looks genuinely puzzled. Lady Harrington thinks it's beneath the family dignity. Catherine rolls her eyes. Lady Harrington thinks anything that happened after 1830 is beneath family dignity, including her own son's marriage to you, if I recall correctly. The blunt truth of this makes you laugh. Your mother-in-law had indeed considered you barely acceptable, a merchant's daughter marrying into minor nobility. Only Edward's insistence had overcome her objections. Tell me about your students, Catherine says as Jane serves tea in your mismatched cups. Your letters mentioned your teaching now. 3 girls from local families, plus Elizabeth. Pride warms your voice. They come twice weekly for lessons in fine needlework. And they pay well. Well enough. You hesitate, then decide on honesty. Between the sewing commissions and the lessons, we're managing to put a little aside each month. Not much, but something. Catherine nods approvingly. You always were resourceful. And the children, how are they adjusting? You tell her about James's bookkeeping, Elizabeth's blossoming skill with embroidery, the younger children's adaptation to country life. As you talk, you realise how much has changed since those first desperate days after Edward's death. The grief hasn't disappeared, but it's no longer the only defining feature of your existence. And you? Catherine asks softly. Beyond the practical concerns, how are you? The question catches you off guard. Victorian etiquette rarely permits such direct inquiry about emotions, especially with those in mourning, but Catherine has always had a refreshing directness. You search for the right words. I'm discovering parts of myself I never knew existed. It's strange. I would give anything to have Edward back, to return to our old life, but at the same time, I can't deny that I've found a kind of purpose in this new existence. Catherine nods thoughtfully. Independence has its own savour, doesn't it? Even when it's forced upon us rather than chosen. Exactly. Relief flows through you at being understood. Is that terrible? To find meaning in widowhood? Not terrible. Human. She echoes Jane's words from earlier. We adapt, we survive, we find joy where we can. Edward would want that for you, wouldn't he? Yes, you say softly. He would. The conversation shifts to London news, mutual acquaintances, social events, political developments. Catherine is a lively storyteller, and you find yourself laughing more than you have in months. The afternoon passes quickly, the gulf between your old and new lives somehow less vast in Catherine's presence. As the sun begins to lower, signalling the end of her visit, she reaches into her reticule. I brought something for you. For next month. Next month? The 1-year mark, she says gently, when you can begin half-mourning. Understanding dawns. In a few weeks, you'll reach the 1-year anniversary of Edward's death. Victorian mourning customs dictate that after a full year, a widow may transition to half-mourning, adding colours like lavender, grey and mauve to her wardrobe, participating more fully in society. Catherine places a package wrapped in brown paper on the table. Open it. Inside, you find fabric. Beautiful, fine wool in a soft shade of lavender and grey silk for trim, enough for a dress. Catherine, emotion closes your throat. The fabric represents more than just clothing. It's a symbol of life continuing, of the gradual lifting of grief's heaviest burden. I thought perhaps your clever fingers could fashion something for yourself, she says. Unless you'd prefer to continue in black. The question makes you consider. Some widows, like Queen Victoria, never emerge from mourning black, wearing it for the rest of their lives as a testament to enduring grief. Others move through the prescribed stages and eventually return to full colours and normal social life. No, you say finally. I'm ready for half-mourning. Edward wouldn't want me to spend the rest of my life shrouded in black. Catherine smiles. I thought not. There's enough fabric there for a dress and perhaps a bonnet. Nothing flashy, of course, proper half-mourning attire, but something other than that bombazine, which I suspect has seen better days. Your current black dress is indeed showing wear, despite careful maintenance. The thought of new clothing in a colour other than black feels almost decadent. Thank you, you say, touching the lavender wool reverently. It's beautiful. Catherine's carriage arrives to take her back to the inn where she's staying with her husband. As you walk her to the door, she surprises you with another question. Have you thought about what comes after mourning, when the 2 years are complete? You blink, startled. Honestly, no. Taking each day as it comes has been challenging enough. You should think about it, she says, adjusting her bonnet. You've built something here, a business, a new life. What will you do when society no longer restricts your movements or activities? The question follows you after Catherine leaves, echoing as you prepare dinner with Jane, supervise the children's evening routines, and finally sit down to your nightly sewing. What comes after mourning? What kind of life do you want to build from these new foundations? The following morning brings a less welcome visitor. Lady Harrington arrives unannounced, her carriage pulling up just as you're preparing to begin the children's lessons. Lady Harrington, Jane announces with barely concealed dismay. Shall I tell her you're indisposed? The temptation is strong, but you shake your head. No, I'll see her. Children, continue with your reading. Elizabeth, you're in charge until I return. Your mother-in-law waits in the small sitting area, ramrolled straight on a chair that seems too humble for her imposing presence. At 63, she remains a formidable figure, still in full mourning black despite the decade since her husband's death. Margaret. She inclines her head slightly. I was informed you had a visitor yesterday. Of course she knows. In small communities, nothing remains private for long. Yes, my friend Catherine Durham came to call. Lady Harrington's lips thin. Lady Durham, you mean? Titles should be respected. You bite back an impatient response. Yes, Lady Durham. I understand she brought you fabric for half-mourning. The speed and detail of local gossip never ceases to amaze you. Yes, she was very thoughtful. It seems premature to be planning for half-mourning when full mourning is still in effect. Her tone suggests more than mere chronological confusion. The 1-year anniversary is in 3 weeks, you point out. I was simply preparing in advance. Many widows choose to remain in black longer than the minimum requirement, she says pointedly. I myself have never left mourning attire. I'm aware. You meet her gaze steadily. But I've decided to follow the traditional progression through the mourning stages. Something like disappointment crosses her face. I see Edward's memory holds less significance for you than I had hoped. The unfairness of this strikes like a physical blow. That's unkind and untrue, you say, your voice sharper than you intended. My adherence to mourning customs has no bearing on how deeply I feel Edward's loss. Society would disagree. Her tone is cool. A widow's exterior appearance reflects her interior devotion. Does it? You think of the women you've met who wear elaborate mourning attire while showing little genuine grief, and others whose simple dress belies their deep feeling. I believe actions speak louder than fabric choices. Lady Harrington's eyebrows rise at your boldness. You've changed, Margaret. Country life has altered you. Yes, you agree simply. It has. An uncomfortable silence falls between you. Finally, she sighs. I actually came to discuss another matter, James's education. Your guard instantly rises. What about it? I've spoken with Reverend Collins. He's willing to tutor James in Latin and mathematics, preparing him for possible university entrance when the time comes. This unexpected offer catches you off guard. That's very generous. The boy has potential, Lady Harrington says stiffly. It shouldn't be wasted simply because his father made poor financial decisions. The backhanded insult to Edward stings, but you focus on the opportunity being presented. James receiving proper education again would be invaluable. What would be the arrangement? You ask cautiously. 3 afternoons weekly at the vicarage. No fee, though a donation to the parish fund would be appropriate when your circumstances allow. She delivers this with the air of someone conferring an immense favour, which, in fairness, she is. I'll discuss it with James, you say, knowing your son will likely jump at the chance. Thank you for arranging this. She nods, apparently satisfied with this response. The vicar's wife mentioned your sewing classes have become quite popular. Another abrupt change of subject, but you're growing accustomed to her conversational tactics. Yes, I have 4 regular students now. Teaching is a more appropriate occupation than taking in mending, she concedes reluctantly, though still hardly ideal. Few of our current circumstances are ideal, you point out. We're adapting as necessary. Something almost like respect flickers in her eyes. Yes, well, necessity has always been the mother of invention, I suppose. She rises to leave. I'll inform Reverend Collins that James will likely begin lessons next week. After she departs, you return to the children's lessons, mind whirling. The interaction with Lady Harrington felt different somehow, less like a superior addressing an inferior, more like 2 women negotiating terms. Has she changed, or have you? That evening, you begin cutting the lavender fabric Catherine brought, laying out the pattern for a simple but elegant day dress appropriate for half-mourning. As your scissors slide through the wool, each snip feels symbolic, cutting ties with the strictest period of grief, preparing for a gradual re-emergence into the world. "That's pretty," Elizabeth says, watching you work. "Will I have half-mourning clothes too?" "Yes," you promise. "We'll dye your white muslin dress grey, and perhaps add lavender ribbon to your bonnet." She touches the fabric wistfully. "I've almost forgotten what it's like to wear colours." "Soon," you tell her, "very soon." As you work on the dress over the next evenings, your thoughts continually return to Catherine's question, what comes after mourning? When the prescribed 2 years of widowhood rituals end, what kind of life will you choose? The Margaret who existed before Edward's death would have had a ready answer. Remarriage, of course. A widow of 38 with 4 children needs a husband for financial security and social standing. But now, you're not so certain. The sewing business brings in steady income. The teaching even more so. You've learned to manage a household on limited means, to make decisions without deferring to a husband, to stand your ground even against formidable opposition like Lady Harrington. Would you willingly return to the protected but constrained existence of a Victorian wife? These thoughts accompany you as you stitch the lavender dress, each careful seam a step toward whatever future awaits beyond morning's shadows. You're not ready to make decisions yet. The grief is still too fresh. The future too uncertain, but for the first time you allow yourself to imagine possibilities beyond mere survival. The day of the anniversary arrives, grey and drizzly. You dress in your black bombazine for the last time, arranging your widow's cap with care. Today you'll visit Edward's grave in the churchyard, marking 12 months since his passing. The children accompany you, solemn in their mourning clothes. James carries flowers, white lilies purchased with his own carefully saved money. Elizabeth holds the younger children's hands, keeping them close in the drizzle. The small country churchyard is peaceful, so different from the crowded London cemetery where Edward lies. You've arranged for the vicar to say a brief prayer at the graveside, marking the day with appropriate solemnity. "It doesn't seem like a year," James says quietly as you walk toward the church. "No," you agree. "In some ways, it feels like yesterday. In others, a lifetime ago." After the simple ceremony, you place the lilies on Edward's grave, murmuring private words of love and remembrance. The children do the same, each in their own way, connecting with the father they're learning to remember rather than expect. Tomorrow, you'll wear the lavender dress for the first time, signaling to the world your transition to half-mourning. Today belongs to Edward and to the grief that, while no longer all-consuming, remains a faithful companion. As you walk home through the soft spring rain, James offers his arm, and you take it, leaning slightly on your son's strengthening frame. Elizabeth chatters quietly to the younger children, pointing out wildflowers and new lambs in the fields. Tomorrow begins a new chapter. Half-mourning, with its gradually expanding freedoms, new colours in your wardrobe and your life, more connections to the community you've reluctantly come to call home. You'll never stop missing Edward. The ache of his absence will always remain, a tender spot in your heart. But alongside that ache, something else grows. Strength, purpose, independence. A life rebuilt from fragments, different from what came before, but no less valuable. The cottage comes into view through the misty rain, smoke curling invitingly from its chimney where Jane has kept the fire burning in your absence. Not the grand London townhouse where you once presided as Edward's wife, but a home nonetheless. Your home, created through necessity, maintained through determination, gradually transformed into something that belongs uniquely to you and your children. Tomorrow, lavender. Today, remembrance. Both have their proper place in the life of a Victorian widow finding her way forward. The lavender dress changes everything and nothing. You catch your reflection in the small mirror as you fasten the last button. The colour is subtle, a muted shade that speaks of grief remembered rather than forgotten. But after 14 months of unrelieved black, it feels almost shockingly bright. The grey silk trim and black buttons maintain propriety, ensuring no one could accuse you of disrespecting Edward's memory. "You look nice, Ma'am," Jane says, adjusting the grey collar. The colour suits you. It does, bringing a hint of warmth to your face that black always drained away. Half-mourning has begun, and with it the gradual reintroduction of colour and life. The hat too, you ask, hesitating over the grey bonnet with its single lavender ribbon. Definitely the hat, Jane nods. Might as well go all in. You laugh at her practicality. All in for half-mourning is still remarkably restrained by normal standards. No bright colours, no elaborate decorations, no festive occasions, just the subtle addition of purples, greys and whites to your wardrobe, and the easing of certain social restrictions. Downstairs, the children react with varying degrees of interest to your transformed appearance. "You look like you again," James says simply. At 17, he's grown taller in the months since Edward died, his face losing its boyish roundness. His lessons with Reverend Collins have given him new purpose, rekindling his academic ambitions. "Pretty," exclaims your youngest, touching the lavender fabric with curious fingers. Elizabeth, now 15, studies you with a more mature eye. "The cut is very fashionable," she approves. "No one would guess you made it yourself." You smile at her assessment. Elizabeth has developed a keen eye for fashion despite her isolation from London society. "High praise indeed. You'll be wearing your grey dress today as well." She nods eagerly. "The dyed muslin isn't as fine as your new wool, but the addition of lavender ribbons has transformed it from sombre to merely subdued." Half-mourning brings subtle but significant changes to your daily life. You can now accept dinner invitations from close friends, though balls and large gatherings remain inappropriate. You can attend church without the heavy weeping veil, your face visible to the congregation. You can write letters on paper with narrow black borders rather than the thick black-edged stationery of deep mourning. Small freedoms that feel enormous after months of restriction. Today marks your first proper social call since Edward's death. Tea with Mrs. Pembroke at the estate manager's house, not merely a business discussion about sewing or a charitable committee meeting, but an actual social visit. "Are you nervous?" Elizabeth asks as you walk together towards the village, both in your half-mourning finery. "A little," you admit. "It's been so long since I made social calls." "You received visitors at our London house all the time," she points out. "Every Tuesday. That was different. Different in ways you struggle to articulate. In London, you were Edward Harrington's wife, your position secure, your role clear. Now you're a widow in reduced circumstances, navigating social waters without the protection of wealth or a husband's status." Mrs. Pembroke greets you warmly, exclaiming over your lavender dress with genuine admiration. "How lovely to see you in colour again, Mrs. Harrington and Miss Elizabeth too. Half-mourning suits you both beautifully." Her sitting room is modest but tasteful, reflecting the comfortable position of an estate manager's family, not wealthy enough for real luxury, but secure in the middle ranks of rural society. "I've invited a few friends," Mrs. Pembroke explains, leading you to seats near the fire. "I hope you don't mind. Everyone's been eager to properly welcome you now that your formal mourning has eased." Before you can respond, the door opens to admit several women. Mrs. Collins, the vicar's wife, Mrs. Wilson, the Mrs. Fairfax, and a woman you don't recognise. "Mrs. Harrington, do you know Mrs. Blackwood?" Mrs. Pembroke performs the introductions. She recently moved to the area. Her husband purchased the old mill property last year. Mrs. Blackwood is perhaps 40, with intelligent eyes and a practical manner. Her half-mourning dress of grey silk suggests a recent bereavement of her own. "My mother," she explains, noting your glance at her attire. "6 months ago. I've just entered half-mourning myself." The shared experience creates an immediate connection. As tea is served and conversation flows around you, you find yourself drawn to Mrs. Blackwood's forthright manner. "I understand you teach embroidery," she says when you're seated together. "My daughter has been begging for lessons. She's 12 and has absolutely no patience for plain sewing, but she's seen some of the fancy work village girls are learning from you." "I'd be happy to include her," you offer. "I have classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays." "Excellent." She hesitates, then adds, "Actually, I had another proposition as well. My husband's mill produces woolen cloth, as you may know. We've been discussing expanding into finer goods. Embroidered shawls, handkerchiefs, that sort of thing. We need someone with taste and skill to oversee production." You stare at her, uncertain you've understood correctly. "You're offering me employment?" "A partnership, actually." Mrs. Blackwood lowers her voice slightly. "I manage the business side while my husband handles the manufacturing. We need someone with artistic vision and needlework expertise. Your reputation in the area is impressive." A business partnership. The concept is so unexpected that you struggle to formulate a response. Victorian society has strict ideas about appropriate occupations for ladies, teaching perhaps, or writing, but certainly not manufacturing or trade. "I realize it's unusual," Mrs. Blackwood acknowledges, reading your expression, "but I find widowhood liberating in certain ways, don't you? The rules seem less absolute when you've already lost so much." Her words resonate deeply. There is a strange freedom in widowhood, a painful, unwanted freedom, but freedom nonetheless. "I'd need to know more details," you say carefully. "The time commitment, the financial arrangements." "Of course," she nods approvingly at your practical questions. "Perhaps you could visit the mill next week, see our operations, discuss particulars." "I'd like that." The remainder of the tea passes pleasantly, with conversation ranging from parish matters to the changing fashions. You find yourself participating more than you expected, offering opinions, even gently disagreeing at points. The rigid self-consciousness that characterized your early days in the village has faded, replaced by a quiet confidence in your own voice. Walking home with Elizabeth, you're both quiet, processing the afternoon's events. "Are you going to do it?" she finally asks. "Work with the Blackwoods?" "I don't know," you answer honestly. "It would be a significant change." "But you're considering it?" "Yes." The realization surprises you. A year ago, you would have dismissed such a notion instantly. Edward's widow, engaging in trade. Unthinkable. But now, "I think you should," Elizabeth says unexpectedly. "You're good at making things beautiful, and practical too. That's a rare combination." Her assessment warms you. "When did you get so wise?" She shrugs, suddenly self-conscious. "I just pay attention, like you taught us." The cottage awaits, its familiarity welcoming after the social exertion of the afternoon. James is at the kitchen table, Latin grammar open before him, deep in conversation with Jane about some household matter. The younger children play quietly in the corner. The scene strikes you suddenly as precious. This little world you've built from necessity and determination. Would a business partnership threaten this fragile equilibrium, or strengthen it with additional security and purpose? The question occupies your thoughts as you prepare dinner, supervise evening lessons, and finally settle to your nightly sewing. The embroidered shawl taking shape beneath your fingers is destined for Mrs. Wilson's daughter's trousseau, fine work commanding a fine price. Perhaps not so different from what Mrs. Blackwood proposes, just on a larger scale. "You're very quiet tonight," Jane observes as she brings you tea. "I received an unexpected offer today." You explain Mrs. Blackwood's proposition. Jane listens without interruption, her practical mind visibly assessing the opportunity. It could be good, she says finally. Regular income, respectable work. But is it proper? A partnership in manufacturing? Proper? Jane snorts softly. Was it proper when you started taking in sewing, when you began teaching, when you negotiated with Lady Harrington about James's education? Put that way, your journey has been a series of improprieties by strict Victorian standards, each one necessary and ultimately beneficial. Besides, Jane adds, you wouldn't be on the factory floor, you'd be designing, directing. Ladies do that sort of thing now. Queen Victoria herself takes an interest in industry. Her practical assessment helps settle your thoughts. I'll visit the mill, you decide. Learn more before making any decisions. The mill visit confirms what Mrs. Blackwood suggested, a genuine opportunity to apply your skills on a larger scale. The operation is small but growing, the workers well treated, the Blackwoods themselves practical, straightforward people without pretension. "We'd start with a line of embroidered shawls," Mr. Blackwood explains as he shows you around. Mrs. Harrington would design the patterns, train the embroiderers, oversee quality. "And the compensation?" you ask directly. "Another small freedom widowhood has granted. A married lady would never discuss money. A widow with 4 children to support must." The figure he names is substantial, more than triple what you currently earn through private sewing and lessons. Enough to provide real security, perhaps even savings for the children's future. "Take a week to consider," Mrs. Blackwood suggests as their carriage returns you to the cottage. It's a significant change. Change. The word that has defined your life since Edward's death. Unwanted, painful change at first, then gradual adaptation, and now, potentially, chosen change. Growth, even. The decision isn't simple. Your current arrangements have stability, if limited prospects. The partnership offers greater rewards, but also greater risks and complications. You discuss it with the children over several evenings, valuing their input as you never would have in your previous life. "I think you should do it," James says firmly. "The additional income could mean university for me, maybe finishing school for Elizabeth." Elizabeth nods agreement. "And you'd be creating beautiful things on a larger scale, your designs reaching more people. Their maturity touches you. These are not the sheltered children of your London life, but young people who understand financial realities and family partnership. What about my current students, you wonder aloud? And the sewing clients? Perhaps you could continue teaching 1 afternoon a week, Elizabeth suggests, and I could help with some of the simpler sewing commissions. The solution feels right, maintaining connections while moving forward. After a week of consideration, you accept the Blackwoods' offer, negotiating specific terms with a confidence that would have astonished your former self. Life settles into new rhythms. 3 days weekly at the mill, designing patterns, training workers in fine embroidery techniques, overseeing production. 1 afternoon teaching your regular students. Evenings still devoted to family and special commissions too fine to delegate. The work brings unexpected satisfaction. Your designs flourish when executed by multiple skilled hands. The shawls sell well in regional markets, then further afield. Mr. Blackwood speaks of expanding to London shops. "We should consider applying for the Great Exhibition," he suggests one afternoon, referring to the international showcase of industry and design planned for the following year. "Your patterns are distinctive enough to stand out. The Great Exhibition. The thought of your work displayed alongside the finest manufacturers in the world both terrifies and exhilarates. Another step away from the sheltered existence of a Victorian wife, another step into a world of possibilities you never imagined." Half-mourning eases other restrictions as well. You begin accepting dinner invitations from the Pembrokes, the Blackwoods, even Reverend Collins and his wife. Elizabeth accompanies you sometimes, gaining social experience appropriate to her age. James focuses intensely on his studies, his sights set firmly on Oxford, his newfound confidence buoyed by Lady Harrington's grudging support. 17 months since Edward died, 7 months until full mourning officially ends, though you've already travelled far beyond where you began. The late summer evening finds you in the cottage garden, enjoying the fading light. Your grey dress with lavender trim is comfortable after a day's work, your hair loosely pinned rather than severely styled. Small physical freedoms that mirror your expanding horizons. A letter arrived earlier from Catherine in London, full of news and gentle inquiries about your plans. Will you remain in the cottage indefinitely, she wonders? Or perhaps consider returning to London when mourning ends completely? The question requires serious consideration. The cottage has become home in ways you never anticipated. Your work with the Blackwoods is fulfilling and profitable. The children have adapted to country life, made friends, established routines. Yet London pulls with memories and opportunities, better education for the children perhaps, wider social and cultural experiences, the chance to reclaim some part of the life you lost with Edward's death. No decision needs to be made immediately, you remind yourself. For now, the cottage, the work, the gradually expanding social circle are enough. Each day brings new challenges, new discoveries, new proofs of your capacity to navigate this unexpected life. A movement at the garden gate catches your attention. James returning from his lessons with Reverend Collins, his stride purposeful, books tucked under his arm. Elizabeth on the doorstep calling the younger children in for supper. Jane visible through the kitchen window, stirring something on the stove. Your family, changed by circumstance but intact, growing in ways that would never have been possible in your previous life. Edward's absence remains a constant ache, a shadow across your happiness. You still talk to him in your mind, especially in moments of decision or accomplishment. "I wish you could see this," you tell him silently. "I wish you could see them, how they've grown, how they've survived, how I've survived." Half-mourning will continue for several more months, the lavender, grey and white of your wardrobe reflecting the gradual lightening of grief's burden, not gone, never gone, but no longer all-consuming, balanced now with purpose, with pride in survival, with cautious hope for what lies ahead. Victorian society has strict rules for widows, but within those rules you've found unexpected space for growth, for reinvention, for a kind of independence you never knew to seek when Edward lived. The black bombazine of deep mourning has given way to lavender and grey. Perhaps one day you'll welcome back the full spectrum of colours and experiences. But for now, this middle path suits you, honouring what was lost while building what remains. A widow, yes, but also a mother, a teacher, a designer, a businesswoman, a woman discovering her own strength, one careful step at a time. The mauve dress hangs on the wardrobe door, a symbol of endings and beginnings. Not black, not lavender, but a soft purple that signals the final stage of your mourning journey. 2 years since Edward's death, 2 years of transformation, struggle, and unexpected growth. Tomorrow marks the official end of your widow's mourning period. Victorian custom dictates that after 24 months you may return to normal society and normal dress, though with continued sobriety and restraint. No bright colours or excessive gaiety yet, but the strict boundaries of widowhood will officially dissolve. "It's beautiful," Elizabeth says, touching the fabric reverently. At 16, she's blossomed into a young woman, her talents with embroidery now earning recognition beyond your small village. You made it yourself, with some help from Mrs. Blackwood's seamstress, you admit, smoothing a hand over the bodice with its subtle beading. "I'm not as skilled with cutting as I am with embroidery." The dress represents more than just the end of mourning. It's the first truly new garment you've owned since Edward died, purchased with your own earnings from the mill partnership, a small extravagance to mark a significant milestone. "Will you wear it to the Blackwoods' dinner tomorrow?" Elizabeth asks. "Yes. The timing is deliberate. The dinner party, small and select, will be your first proper social event since becoming a widow, a gentle re-entry into society rather than a plunge." "Lady Harrington will have opinions," Elizabeth remarks, a hint of mischief in her tone. "Lady Harrington always has opinions," you reply dryly. "Your mother-in-law remains a complicated presence in your life, disapproving of many of your choices, yet grudgingly respectful of your determination. She's arranged for James to sit the Oxford entrance examinations, a significant concession to his academic promise and your insistence that his education continue." "She means well," you add, feeling you should defend her somewhat, in her own way. "I suppose." Elizabeth sounds unconvinced. She still thinks you should wear black forever, like Queen Victoria. The comparison isn't entirely fair. Queen Victoria's devotion to mourning dress has become legendary. 40 years and counting since Prince Albert's death, with no sign of returning to colour. Her extreme dedication has influenced many widows to remain in black long past the required period. Different people mourn differently, you say, a lesson hard won through your own experience. What matters is what feels right to each person. For you, the progression through mourning stages has matched your internal journey, the overwhelming darkness of early grief, giving way gradually to purpose, and even moments of joy. The mauve dress feels right for where you are now, still honouring Edward's memory, but no longer defined solely by his absence. Morning brings nervous anticipation as you dress for the day. The mauve fabric settles around you, lighter than the heavy bombazine you've worn for so long. Jane secures your hair in a style slightly less severe than morning dictated, with soft waves framing your face. "Well?" you ask, turning to face her critical eye. "Perfect," she declares. "Proper, but not grim." The distinction matters. Victorian society judges widows harshly for any perceived disrespect to their husband's memory, but also eyes them with suspicion if they cling too dramatically to grief. The balance is delicate, especially for a woman in your position, no longer young, but not elderly, not wealthy, but not destitute, neither completely conventional nor entirely unconventional in your choices. Downstairs, the children react with varying degrees of interest to your transformed appearance. "You look like you did in London," your youngest observes, studying you with solemn eyes. "Before Papa went to heaven." The innocent comment catches you off guard. At 7, she barely remembers your London life, yet something in your demeanour must have triggered a connection. "Not quite," you say gently, "but perhaps a little more like myself again." James, home from his intensive study with Reverend Collins, gives you a considering look. "The colour suits you, Mother." At 18, he's a young man now, his features settling into mature lines that occasionally startle you with their resemblance to Edward. "Thank you." You straighten his collar automatically, a maternal gesture he tolerates with good humour. "Are you prepared for next week's examinations?" "As prepared as possible," he says with forced confidence. The Oxford entrance looms large in his thoughts, representing both opportunity and pressure. Reverend Collins thinks I have a fair chance. More than fair, you assure him. You've worked incredibly hard. The day unfolds, with its usual rhythms: household management in the morning, an afternoon at the mill overseeing production of a new shawl design, tea with the family, then preparation for the evening's dinner at the Blackwoods. Elizabeth accompanies you, wearing her best dress modified with new trim. At 16, she's old enough for select social occasions, especially in the country where rules are somewhat more relaxed than London. "Nervous?" you ask as you walk together toward the Blackwoods' substantial house at the edge of the village. "A little," she admits. "It's been so long since we attended a proper dinner." "Just remember, smaller fork for fish, work from the outside in, and no elbows on the table," you remind her, only half joking. "I know, Mother," she says with teenage exasperation, but her smile betrays her appreciation for the reminder. The Blackwoods dinner party includes 8 guests. The Pembrokes, Reverend and Mrs. Collins, a neighbouring landowner and his wife, and you and Elizabeth. Not a large gathering by London standards, but significant in your rural community. Mrs. Blackwood greets you warmly, her eyes taking in your mauve dress with approval. "You look wonderful, Margaret. The end of mourning suits you." The use of your first name still feels novel. In the past 6 months, your relationship with the Blackwoods has evolved from strictly professional to something approaching friendship, another shift that would have been unlikely in your previous life. "Thank you, Helen," you reply, returning the informality. "Elizabeth and I are delighted to be included." The evening progresses pleasantly. The food is excellent, the conversation interesting without being controversial. You find yourself participating naturally, offering opinions, even gently disagreeing at points. The rigid self-consciousness that characterized your early days after Edward's death has faded, replaced by a quiet confidence in your own voice. "Mrs. Harrington's designs have transformed our little enterprise," Mr. Blackwood tells the table during a discussion of local industry. "We've received orders from as far as London and Edinburgh." "You exaggerate, sir," you demur, though the praise warms you. "Not at all," he insists. "Tell them about the Great Exhibition." All eyes turn to you with interest. The Great Exhibition, scheduled for the following year, has captured national attention, a showcase of industry, art and achievement from across Britain and its empire. "We've submitted an application," you explain, "though there's no certainty of acceptance. The competition is considerable." "I've seen the submission pieces," Mrs. Pembroke chimes in. "They're exquisite, the shawl with the wild roses especially." The conversation shifts to other topics, but the brief moment of professional recognition lingers pleasantly. Your work at the mill has become more than mere employment. It's a creative outlet that brings genuine satisfaction. Later, as the evening winds down, Reverend Collins approaches you quietly. "I wanted to mention, Mrs. Harrington, that James continues to impress me with his dedication. I've written to a colleague at Oxford who may be able to help secure a small scholarship to supplement what Lady Harrington has arranged." Relief and gratitude wash through you. James's education has been your greatest concern, the financial burden potentially overwhelming despite your improved circumstances. That would be tremendously helpful, you say with feeling. We're deeply grateful for all you've done for him. The boy has extraordinary potential, the vicar replies simply. It would be a shame to see it wasted for want of funds. On the walk home with Elizabeth, both of you wrapped in shawls against the evening chill, you reflect on the evening's small victories and what they represent in your journey. It felt almost normal, Elizabeth observes, being at a dinner party again. Yes, you agree, though different from our London gatherings. Better, I think, she says thoughtfully. People actually talked about real things, not just gossip and fashion. Her assessment surprises you, though perhaps it shouldn't. Elizabeth has grown up considerably in these 2 years. Her perspective shaped by experiences no child should face, yet experiences that have given her unusual wisdom. I've been thinking, she continues after a moment, about what I might do when James goes to Oxford. Do? You glance at her curiously. For my future, she clarifies. I don't want to just wait around hoping for marriage someday. In your previous life, her future would have been clear. Finishing school, perhaps, then a suitable marriage arranged with careful attention to social standing and financial security. Widowhood and reduced circumstances have disrupted that planned trajectory. What are you considering, you ask, genuinely curious. I love teaching the younger girls embroidery, she says, and I was thinking perhaps I could train properly as a governess or a teacher. Mrs. Collins mentioned the new training college for women teachers in York. A teacher. Not what you would have envisioned for your daughter in your previous life, yet not without merit. Elizabeth has a natural patience with children, a gift for explaining complex concepts simply. It's worth considering, you say carefully, though there's no rush to decide. You're only 16. I know, but I like having a plan. She squeezes your arm affectionately, like you did when everything changed. Her words catch you off guard. I didn't have a plan. Darling, I was just trying to survive day by day. Maybe at first, she concedes, but then you start making choices. The sewing, the teaching, the mill work. You didn't just let things happen to us. Her perception humbles you. You never saw your desperate scrambling as strategic, yet through her eyes your actions take on a dignity and purpose you hadn't recognized. The cottage welcomes you home, lamplight glowing in the windows. No longer the strange, cramped place it seemed when you first arrived, but a true home shaped by your family's needs and experiences. Later, after Elizabeth has gone to bed, you sit by the fire with your embroidery. Not commissioned work this time, but a personal project. A sampler with the Harrington family motto and the dates of significant events. Edward's birth and death, your marriage, the children's births, a tangible record of your family's history. 2 years a widow. The official mourning period complete, the black bombazine and weeping veil relegated to memory. Yet Edward remains present in your thoughts, in James's profile, in family stories shared at dinner. Victorian mourning customs dictate that tomorrow you may re-enter society fully, wear colours again, though subdued ones, perhaps even consider remarriage if appropriate. The widow's weeds no longer required, the period of ritual grief officially concluded. But the heart follows no such tidy timetable. Your grief has evolved rather than vanished. Less raw now, less consuming, but permanently woven into the fabric of your being. Not a burden to be shed after an arbitrary period, but a transformation to be acknowledged and incorporated. A knock at the cottage door interrupts your reflections. Jane answers, returning moments later with a letter bearing Lady Harrington's seal. Delivered by special messenger, Jane says, eyebrows raised at this unusual occurrence. Must be important. You break the seal, unfolding the single sheet covered in your mother-in-law's distinctive handwriting, Margaret. I write with news that could not wait for the regular post. My solicitor has completed a thorough review of Edward's business affairs, prompted by some information that recently came to light. It appears that certain investments made shortly before his death have finally matured, yielding a modest but significant sum. The amount is not sufficient to restore your previous lifestyle, but it would allow for James's university expenses without hardship and perhaps a small annuity to supplement your income. I shall call next week to discuss the matter in detail. Until then, please accept my congratulations on completing your formal mourning period. Edward would be proud of the dignity with which you have conducted yourself these past 2 years. You stare at the letter, reading it twice to ensure you've understood correctly. Financial relief arriving just as James prepares for Oxford, and from Lady Harrington an acknowledgement of your dignity. High praise indeed from that quarter. Good news? Jane asks, noting your expression. Yes, you say simply, folding the letter carefully. Very good news. The following morning you wake with a strange sense of lightness. The mauve dress hanging in your wardrobe no longer represents just the end of mourning, but the beginning of a new chapter. The unexpected inheritance changes your calculations, providing additional security while still allowing you the independence your work brings. Downstairs, the children gather for breakfast, James quizzing Elizabeth on Latin vocabulary while the younger ones squabble good-naturedly over porridge. You share the news from Lady Harrington, watching their faces light with cautious excitement. "So I can definitely go to Oxford if I pass the examinations?" James asks, hope warring with caution in his expression. "Yes," you confirm. "The financial concerns are resolved." "And we can stay in the cottage?" Elizabeth presses. "We don't have to move back to London?" Her question catches you by surprise. "Do you want to stay here?" The children exchange glances, some silent communication passing between them. "We like it here," James says, acting as spokesperson. "It's home now." Home. The word resonates deeply. This place that once represented loss and reduction has transformed into something precious, a true home created through shared struggle and adaptation. "Then we'll stay," you decide, "at least for now, though you'll be at Oxford soon, James, and Elizabeth may eventually go to training college. But this will be where we come back to," Elizabeth says with satisfaction. "Our anchor." An anchor, yes, that's what the cottage has become. Not just shelter, but a fixed point from which your family can venture forth and return. Later, you walk alone to the village churchyard, a small tribute of flowers in hand. Edward's grave is well tended, the stone simple but dignified. You place the flowers carefully, then stand in quiet communion with the husband you lost 2 years ago. The children are thriving, you tell him softly, a private ritual you've developed over months. James has a real chance at Oxford. Elizabeth wants to become a teacher. The little ones are growing too quickly. A gentle breeze rustles the churchyard trees, peaceful rather than melancholy. "I've changed," you continue, "in ways I never expected. I'm stronger than I knew, more capable. I think you would be surprised, perhaps even proud." The thought brings a smile rather than tears. Edward would indeed be proud of you, of the children, of the life you've managed to rebuild from the wreckage of his death. You touch the headstone gently. "I'll always miss you. That doesn't change with coloured dresses or dinner parties or business partnerships, but we're going to be all right, Edward. We already are." The walk back to the cottage takes you through the village, where familiar faces greet you with nods and smiles. No longer the strange widow from London, object of curiosity and pity, but Mrs. Harrington, embroidery teacher, business partner at the mill, mother to promising children, respected member of the community. Victorian society has strict scripts for widows, rigid expectations for how grief should be performed and processed, the black clothes, the social isolation, the weeping veil, all designed to make mourning visible to ensure proper respect for the deceased. But within those scripts, you found your own path, not by rejecting tradition entirely, but by finding the spaces within it where growth was possible, wearing the black bombazine while learning to support your family, observing social restrictions while building new connections, honouring Edward's memory while discovering your own strength. As you approach the cottage, you see your family gathered in the small garden, James reading on the bench, Elizabeth teaching the younger children some game involving pebbles and a drawn circle, Jane hanging laundry on the line, her practical movements as familiar as your own heartbeat. This is what matters, you realise, not the colour of your dress or the stage of your mourning, but the life you've built from necessity and determination, the relationships strengthened through adversity, the skills discovered when survival demanded them. 2 years, a widow, the official mourning period complete, but Edward's memory remains woven through the fabric of your family, a thread that connects rather than constrains. You step into the garden, and your children look up with smiles of welcome. Tomorrow brings new challenges, James's examinations, decisions about Elizabeth's education, Lady Harrington's visit, work at the mill. But today, in this moment, there is simple contentment in being exactly where you are. The journey from that first terrible morning when you woke to find Edward gone has been long and painful, from the suffocating weight of the weeping veil to the stifling isolation of deep mourning, from financial terror to hard-won security, from helpless grief to purposeful adaptation. You are still Margaret Harrington, Edward's widow, but you are also more a businesswoman, a teacher, the architect of your family's survival and recovery, stronger than you knew, more resilient than you imagined, capable of growth even in grief's barren soil. The mauve dress hanging in your wardrobe represents not just the end of formal mourning, but the beginning of whatever comes next. A future shaped by your own choices rather than merely by circumstance or convention. As night falls and you tuck your children into bed, there is peace in this knowledge. The Victorian widow's path has been walked with dignity, but the journey continues beyond its prescribed end, into tomorrow, into possibility, into a life reclaimed and reimagined. And as you drift towards sleep in your cottage bed, so different from the London townhouse where your marriage thrived, yet somehow exactly where you're meant to be, perhaps you too can find peace in knowing that even after profound loss, life continues. That strength can be found in unexpected places, that you, like Margaret Harrington, contain depths of resilience you may never have discovered without adversity to reveal them. Sleep well, knowing that darkness eventually gives